Steve was hilarious.
Call the meeting to order. Clerk Bujold, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcox,
Present.
Mayor Brown,
Present.
Councilmember Fellows, Councilmember Tucson,
Present.
Councilmember Simmons,
Here.
Councilmember McLean,
Here.
Councilmember King.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'll give us a moment to prepare, center ourselves in the meeting. I entertain a motion for agenda approval.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilmember Tucson, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. Any updates or changes? Seeing none, all in favor of the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, you have our resolution for closed session.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that this council enter into a closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268E for the purpose of discussing the pending litigation of VTP Riverwoods LLC and VTP Arbor One LLC versus City of Ypsilanti, and I so move.
Or
By Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, supported by Councilmember Tucson. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
yes.
Councilmember Simmons, Councilmember McLean, Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Unanimous. We move into a closed session now.
All right, thank you. We'll adjourn the meeting until 7 p.m. Okay. Call the meeting back to order. Mayor Pro Tem, if you could read the resolution.
Absolutely. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that this council leave closed session and return to the open session of this meeting, and I so move.
Support. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen, sorry, and supported by Councilmember Simmons.
I don't even know what that word was.
I was merging Wilcoxen and Simmons together, I think. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're now back in open session. Thank you all so much for your patience and good evening. We're actually at our opportunity for public comment. And so, members of the audience will have 3 minutes to address council. I will start with those who signed up on the list, and then I'll move to hands in the audience and then hands on Zoom. When I call your name, if you could please, if you're able to approach the podium, state your name and address for the record. Public comment will last for 45 minutes. And at the end of that time, if we have not completed the folks who have raised their hand to speak, then we will keep a list and return to that at the end. And so first we have Finn Bell. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Finn Bell. I use he, him pronouns. I live at 1123 Pearl Street. And I wanted to thank you all for letting me leave comment today. And I wanted to speak in support of the resolution that Councilmember McLean has brought forward to preserve the pawpaws that are on Wallace Boulevard. I'm part of the group of people that have been caring for that median and those specific pawpaws for years now, and really want both those individual trees preserved, and then also in terms of setting city policy to really focus on, keeping trees that are fruit trees and native trees as those are heritage trees, and really kind of prioritizing that, especially when there are neighbors who are interested in caring for them. Also, one of the things that I've noticed in other cities, I'm from St. Louis, and whenever I'm there in the parks, if you go to the parks, there are the really big trees, and then also there are small trees growing alongside them, because of course, eventually the big trees will die. So like thinking, how can we do succession planting and actually really be thinking holistically in terms of moving into the future. So I'd really like to see city resources go towards preserving trees, planting trees, pruning and caring for trees. And then of course, when trees are truly dangerous, as we do have many, in our city that are, that those are the trees that we focus on cutting down, not perfectly healthy trees that are cared for. So thank you all so much for your consideration. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mary Garboden? Good evening.
Good evening, Council. My name is Mary Garboden. I live on Pearl Street as well. And I'm also here to speak in support of Resolution 068 to save those two pawpaw trees. I thank Councilmember McLean for bringing that forward. I'm a volunteer landscaper on that median in Normal Park. I've been maintaining one of the little end caps for at least 15 years. And so the addition of those trees about 5 years ago was a beautiful addition, and I've helped to take care of those too. So I think this resolution is a great intermediate measure to save those trees. And I also encourage you to look at ways to preserve other native and fruit-bearing trees that are on medians, on the tree lawns throughout the city. I see quite a few as I'm walking around, and I think it would be a huge loss to not allow those to stay. So thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Those are the only two names that I had signed up. So if there are other members of the audience who would like to address council, please raise your hand. Oh, sorry. I thought you saw the hand. My bad, Brian. All right. Good evening.
Oh, good evening, all. Jeremy Haley, Ipsy Township. Question for you. Where can I get the information when the Peninsular Dam comes down? At what level is the river going to be at that point? Because they're going to have to kind of equal out, right? Because one's kind of higher than the other. Did the engineers come up with some like that?
I can talk to you after this.
Okay, thank you. It's like they're coming down, so it's got to be a change, because if you were to do that in the lab, obviously something would change, even the flow, it can be recreated and the level would equal out. One would rise, one would lower, so how would that affect the river coming through the city and stuff and like that, and going into Ford Lake? Next one is, I don't know if you're aware of the Cavenue project that's being planned on I-94, going from the Lodge all the way to Ann Arbor Sling Road. It's the self-driving car lane. Have you been on 94 on the westbound lane, going between Haggerty and Ross Mill Road, and they got that one lane sectioned off? That's by a private owned company through a law that the state house passed in 2021. Allows a private company to take ownership of public roads and install self-driving car lanes. And because they install the infrastructure for such said lanes, they will charge fees to drive on lanes, and they keep such said all fees. And right now, I brought it up to the Washtenaw Board of Commissioners meeting a few times, and they are working on some kind of resolution or something to get to SEMCOG to actually get more people behind this. And the one that's kind of leading the thing is Robbie Youssef on the Board of Commissioners. And he's the one that was in the House when the bill passed. He voted against it. I'm letting you all know it's going to affect every resident in Ypsilanti, as well as people in Ipsy Township and anybody that wants to get on 94. I'm letting you know that if you can stand behind and support such a resolution, we cannot let private companies take over our public roads for their personal gain, pretty much what it is. Even though, it's self-driving cars, whatnot, it doesn't matter. It's a public asset, belongs to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Geringer. Good evening.
Good evening, Brian Geringer. I live in the gerrymandered part of Ward 1. It's great to be here tonight. Spring is coming, I'm excited for it. So yeah, eventually, it's coming eventually. Those pawpaw flowers, they're coming out. Maybe not this year, but soon enough. I'm here to advocate in favor of those pawpaw trees being able to continue their existence. They can't be transplanted, not an option realistically, not for less than like $10,000. But more specifically, so yes, thank you for that resolution. More, not specifically, more broadly, I want to advocate for something that Councilmember McLean was discussing at that Pawpaw Social, which is a sort of stewardship model of thinking about public trees. I think that, yeah, more public trees is good. More food growing trees is good. It's good for people. It's good for birdies. It's good for other animals. It's good for insects. It is extremely important in our, not dying, but um, dying world to be supportive of these ecological elements that are so important. It is obviously a very great web that is woven by the natural elements and living things. Some people don't like opossums. I love opossums. So some people don't like opossums, but they do like not having Lyme disease, Some people don't like bugs, but they do like not having their basement flooded, which happens because trees are planted by birds, which eat the bugs. Um, I would say regarding those specific trees on Wallace, that was an incredibly pro job. That was, I don't know, but done by those folks who did it. It was done extremely well, and so I think that is like this is just getting free work. And I want to mention something that sort of, from my experience, what I've found is that, I've heard that there was suggestions that other trees could have been planted there, ones that are on the approved list. But I want to mention one thing very important here, which is that people care for things that they have a hand in creating. So, it could have been an oak tree, but those people who planted those trees decided to plant pawpaw trees, and they will therefore have buy-in to care for those trees into the future because of that. And so I think the issues with the city caring for these over, or like having extra burden over time, that's a real concern, but the people can help do it. Thank you.
Are there other hands in the audience who would like to address, people, folks, who would like to address council? Please raise your hand. Anyone on, not just arms, right, not just arms. Anyone on Zoom?
If anyone on Zoom would like to speak, please raise your hand. No hands.
Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment and move into our highly anticipated presentation from bond council with Mr. McGow. Good evening.
Good evening. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Pat McGow. I'm an attorney, and I have worked with the city on bond and finance projects for about 25 years. But it's been a long time since I've been here because the city hasn't issued a bond in its own name since about 2016. You've been involved in other projects through YCUA for water and sewer projects, but it's been a while since the city did a bond issue. So yeah, so while she's pulling it up, so what I was asked to do is talk a little bit about bonds in general, the bonding process, and I wanted to kind of talk about some different types of bonds that the city has used in the past, and then also then talk about the process for issuing capital improvement bonds, as I understand you have a couple projects coming up where you may be considering that tool. So with that, and by the way, if you want to ask questions during the presentation, feel free to do so, and we'll also provide an opportunity at the end. Okay, so with that, first question people ask is, what is a municipal bond? A lot of times city councils are nervous about bonding. They don't understand it. It's big money. But really, a bond is basically an IOU. It's simply a written promise to pay back a certain amount of money. It's generally issued by state or local governments. Typically, it can be anywhere from 1 to 40 years. And for a lot of the projects that cities do that are for public purposes, it can be tax exempt to the investors. And that means that you, as a city, can borrow at a lower interest rate than other similarly situated borrowers. So it can be a very safe investment for investors, and that allows cities and local governments to borrow at a lower interest rate than a lot of private companies could do. The other question I get when I advance the slide, am I not pushing the button correctly? Can you advance the slide from there? There we go. People always say, why can't we just go borrow the money from a bank? And my short answer is you can't go to the bank and sign a note or get a mortgage. Cities, local governments can't go to the bank and get a loan directly from the bank. People say, well, why not? Where does it say we can't do that? And my answer is there's nowhere that says that you can. So the rules of municipal finance are very specific. And unless the statute gives you the express authority to go do something, you can't do it. So things like bank loans are not something that you can do. So what cities can do to borrow money is issue municipal bonds or do installment purchase agreements. And we'll talk about those a little later here. So I just want to say what's not allowed is you can't go get a line of credit at a bank. You can't do a mortgage note, and you can't go sign a standard bank promissory note or a commercial loan. However, banks can buy your bonds. Banks can finance your installment purchase agreement. So you can still do business with a bank, but you can't just go get a loan from a bank without following some statutory process for issuing bonds. So there are dozens of different laws that allow cities to issue bonds, and they get revised all the time for different purposes for projects, for different sources of revenue, and they each have different processes. So what I'm going to do here next is talk about the types of bonds that the city can issue, and all of these are types of bonds that the city has used in the past for different types of projects. And when we talk about bonds, here's the list, and we're going to kind of go through each of these one by one. Bonds generally fall in two categories: general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. So what's the difference? A general obligation bond is one that is backed by the city's full faith and credit. We think about it as being backed by the city's taxing power, but basically you're pledging your available revenues to pay back the debt. And there's two different flavors of general obligation bonds in Michigan. One is a limited tax general obligation, and the other is an unlimited tax general obligation. The difference is whether or not it's approved by the voters. So under the Michigan Constitution, if the voters approve a bond proposal at an election, that gives the city or school district or whoever the local unit is the ability to levy an extra tax in order to pay back that bond. That tax is considered to be an unlimited tax in the sense that you can levy whatever millage rate you need to in order to cover the debt service. So if something happens and you lose half your taxable value, due to a fire or calamity, you can double the millage rate the next year. Same thing if your taxable values are going up, you're supposed to lower that millage rate because you only are allowed and supposed to levy what you need to pay back that debt. So that's called an unlimited tax bond. The rest of them are limited tax bonds, and that's really most of the other types of bonds. And a limited tax bonds means you're pledging your taxing power, and you'll raise your taxes up to whatever amount you can, but you can't go above that existing charter rate. So that's what's considered a limited tax bond. Revenue bonds are bonds that are instead paid by a specific source of revenues. Think about like your enterprise funds like water and sewer. It's not paid from taxes, but it's paid from user charges. And for a city like yours, we're really talking about water and sewer revenues. I mean, there are some places where parking revenue systems exist and those recreation systems, but the reality is we're really talking about water and sewer bonds. They don't have to be approved by the voters. They generally are not a debt of the city and not subject to the city's debt limits. And one of the features of them is they may have some additional requirements because they're considered not quite as secure as a general obligation bond. And those are things that are done to make them a little bit more marketable. So we'll talk about that in just a second. So those are the two categories of bonds: general obligation and revenue bonds. The other important thing is, how are we paying the bond back? And this is where it could be different depending upon what the project is. So there's lots of different sources of revenue that you have to pay back bonds. It could be your general operating taxes that you levy as part of your general tax levy, your charter limit, which was at 20, now it's down to 17. You could have special voted millages that are specifically for a particular type of project or use that can be used to pay debt service on bonds. And you may have approved a bond proposal at an election, you get to use that voted debt millage. So there's different kinds of taxes that can be used. Other major category is user charges for the users of a utility system. So your water and sewer rates that are charged are used to pay back bonds for water and sewer projects. So that's another main category of revenues available. You may have special assessments. In the past, specially assessing for street improvements or other types of sidewalk improvements could be used in a bond issue to pay for those types of projects. You have 2 DDAs in your community that generate tax increment revenues. You could issue a bond and use some of the tax increment revenues from the DDA or the Depot Town DDA in order to pay back a bond for one of their projects. And then the other main category, the city receives tax revenues from gas and weight taxes from the state. We call them Act 51 revenues or Michigan Transportation Fund revenues. Those are required to be used for major and local streets and bridges and road projects. But you can also issue bonds and pledge those to pay back for projects for roads and streets. So there's a variety of sources of revenues that you can use in order to pay back a bond issue. And so very often when we're talking about a project, what we'll look at is what's the expected source of money to pay it back, what's the project for, and that helps us lead to what our different options are for bonding. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of go through those main categories and talk a little bit about how the city has used these in the past. So the first is a voted unlimited tax general obligation bond. This is the basic voters approve a bond proposal. The city has done this before back in, 2001. The city voted road bonds for about 16 million and issued them in 2001 and 2003, paid back from a debt millage. The city also did something similar in around 2016 when a proposal was voted to support the Water Street bonds with a debt millage, and that's still being levied today while those bonds are outstanding. So the benefit to a voted unlimited tax general obligation bond is it gives you that dedicated source of money. You're not having to dip into some other fund or use your operating revenues. It gives you the ability to levy a separate tax in order to pay it back. It's a very safe and secure bond because the purchasers know that you're going to be able to levy a tax at whatever you need to pay it back. A reason not to do it is maybe you don't need that extra voted tax levy or you don't want to raise taxes for it. You've got a dedicated revenue source. Or maybe because you got to hold an election that changes the timing, makes it more of a political issue. So there's the different factors that weigh into whether or not a voted unlimited tax general obligation bond, is the right thing for the project. I mentioned earlier installment purchase agreements. This is an old statute that really started out as a land contract, but it basically says that you can buy property in installments, real or personal property. So this is ideal if you want to buy a piece of land and do it maybe relatively quickly, or you need to pay for a fire truck or an expensive piece of equipment. The nice thing about an installment purchase agreement is that there's no referendum right. It doesn't require special treasury approval. There's no special notices, so it can be done relatively quickly. The downside is that there is a limit of 15 years, and there's a smaller debt limit that you can't have installment purchase agreements outstanding of more than 1.25% of your taxable value. But this is really kind of a nice tool for buying land or buying fire trucks or equipment like that. And banks like these as long as they're relatively short. So even though that limit is 15 years, the reality is that most banks don't want to finance something for 15 years. They love 5 to 7 years. So this is a nice tool to buy a piece of property or a fire truck. The city used this a lot back in the mid-2000s when it was acquiring property for the Water Street project and has used it, I think, for those types of things in the past as well. The main type of bond that is now issued by Michigan cities is a capital improvement bond. Since 2001, this is sort of the, you can do anything in the kitchen sink with a capital improvement bond. And that's why it's a pretty common bond issue, because you can finance any type of capital improvement that you're authorized to do. You can pledge your limited tax full faith and credit because it's without a vote, but you can use a variety of sources of revenues in order to pay back the bond. And very often we can combine different projects into a single bond issue so that you may have some of it paid from DDA tax increment revenues, some of it paid from water and sewer, some of it paid from taxes. So it's a nice, one size fits all type bond issue. There is a separate debt limit for this. The city has an overall general debt limit, which says you can't have general obligation bonds of more than 10% of your SEV. So right now, with your SEV over 700 some odd million, I think Reagan and I were calculating the numbers, your 10% debt limit says that you have over $60 million of capacity for general obligation bonds. Now, I don't want you to think that that means you can bond and borrow 60 million. This is kind of like your credit card limit. It's the maximum amount you can borrow, but that doesn't mean you can pay it back. But that is a very nice margin because I mentioned earlier in the early 2000s, the city was getting near its 10% debt limit, and now you've got plenty of capacity there. A capital improvement bond has a 5% debt limit. So if we look at that, you've got at least $30+ million of capacity to issue capital improvement bonds if that was a tool that you wanted to use. And again, this was used a lot. The statute came into and was enacted in 2001. So in the early 2000s, this was another tool the city used for a lot of the Water Street project. A lot of cities have used this for buildings, for roads, anything that you're going to pay for that you don't need to have that voted debt millage or use, water and sewer revenues. So it's a nice catch-all tool. Right now, the only capital improvement bonds that you have outstanding are the two bond issues from 2016, which was a refinancing of a capital improvement bond for Water Street. Right now, there's about 5.6 million outstanding. That's going to go down this spring as you pay down debt, actually in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be less by the end of your fiscal year, June 30. I mentioned revenue bonds earlier. This is where you don't pledge your taxes, but you use the revenues of the water and sewer system. The city did a lot of revenue bonds in the early 2000s, I mentioned, because you were near your capital improvement, or your general obligation debt limit. And so revenue bonds, because they only pledge water and sewer rates, they don't count against your debt limit. They generally have a slightly higher interest rate than general obligation bonds, and there's some other costs sometimes that go along with it, such as having to have a reserve fund or certain rate covenants. But it is a good way to pay for a lot of water and sewer improvements. The bonds that the city did probably from around 2001 to the early 2010s, many of those were done through a state revolving fund program where the interest rate was a fixed low interest rate, so you actually didn't pay a higher interest rate by using revenue bonds. So that's been a tool that the city has used a lot. I think right now you've got about $10.7 million outstanding in revenue bonds from that time period. After that, the city switched back to issuing bonds through YCUA. So as many of you know, YCUA, or the Ypsilanti Community Utilities Authority, is a special authority that was created by the city and the township to essentially build, finance, and operate water and sewer systems. The statute really was enacted prior to that. One of the only ways that two units could work together to do that was if the county did it for you and oversaw the project. By creating a 233 authority, it allows two communities to create it, to run it together, to figure out how to do it together, and they can issue bonds and have the city and or the township pledge its full faith and credit for the project. So you've done a number of these projects more recently, and the way it works is the two units create the authority, and then the authority enters into a contract with you that says we're going to borrow X million dollars, and the city of Ypsilanti is going to pay X percent. Maybe Ypsilanti Township is going to pay Y percent, and you pledge your full faith and credit as security, which gives it a nice credit rating, but they actually use the revenues generated from the water and sewer. So even though it's a general obligation pledge of the city, you're actually using water and sewer revenues to pay it. So this has been a nice tool that you've used here for a number of years. And I think actually even in the last couple of months, my partner Tom Colas was here the last time there was a project. And I think right now you've got about $19 million outstanding from these types of bonds. So again, general obligation pledge, but it's payable from the water and sewer rates. So you're really not using taxes, even though that's pledged as security. The other category here that you have outstanding is the refunding bonds. This is really just a refinancing. So it's kind of like refinancing your mortgage. You issue bonds for 20 years and the rates are fixed. And if rates go down later, you can issue a new bond issue to refinance it. Sometimes rates don't even have to go down because you've got a 20-year bond. Usually bonds aren't payable in the first 10 years. So very often we look at refinancing bonds around the 10th year, and that means there's only 10 years left. So even if rates are the same, because there's less years on the debt, you can probably get a lower interest rate. Reagan and his staff are often looking at the city's debt to see if there's opportunities to refinance. Again, the last time this was done was in 2016 for those Water Street bonds, which will be paid off in 2031. So again, this is something that allows you, just because you do a bond issue and lock in rates for 20 years, you may still have the opportunity to save money. And this is really only done if you save money after paying all the costs. So that's really, it's like refinancing your mortgage. Okay, real quick, I'm just going to kind of talk about bond sales because you may hear different terms about different ways you can sell bonds. So basically, there's two different ways that bonds are sold: a competitive sale and a negotiated sale. And the city has used both methods for bond issues in the past. A competitive sale is exactly what it sounds like. You sell bonds, you publish a notice, you take bids at a certain time, and whoever gives you the lowest interest rate, you award to. By law, you're required to award to whoever gives you the lowest true interest cost. So it's a true competitive bid process. A negotiated sale is where you pick an underwriter in advance, and then they go out into the market on a certain day, try to sell the bonds, come back later that day and say, here's the rates. So both methods have their pros and cons. I would say that usually when doing a new project, the city has done competitive sales, and usually when doing a refinancing or something that's a little bit more complicated, the city has done negotiated sales. Again, this is something that when you get to that part of the process, the finance team works with the city manager, finance director to come up with what the best recommendation is, and then come back to you as part of the bond resolution for approval. Another side category is a direct placement. This is where you, instead of doing a competitive sale where anybody and everybody can bid and you go through that process, you specifically send something to maybe banks. This is, when you do an installment purchase, or if you've got something short or small that would be very attractive to a bank, you don't want to go through all the expenses and costs of doing a public bond offering. This is a way that you can do it. It's considered to be a negotiated sale. And again, it's really ideal for shorter durations or smaller amounts. Yes.
Just a really quick question. So as you know, for the competitive bonds or these different things, it's really looking for like one entity or something to hold the whole amount that we're going for. It's not like people are getting pieces.
Yeah, great question. So when I talk about a competitive sale, one entity has to buy the bond issue. It's going to be an investment banking firm. It could be Merrill Lynch, or it could be Huntington Securities, or it could be a local bank. But many times when it's a financial firm, they buy the whole thing, but then they sell it to customers. They may take a chunk and sell it to this mutual fund, that life insurance fund. Maybe individual investors can buy pieces. We don't really know who the bonds are actually held by eventually. All you care about is what gives you the lowest rate. But you're right that you don't have to worry about selling them. And if you say, hey, some people in our community want to buy some of these bonds, that generally works by them going to their broker and saying, hey, Huntington Securities bought our last bond issue. Do they have any available? It's not like you're looking to individually try to find people to buy smaller bonds. You sell the whole bond issue to one buyer, and then that's their job to then figure out who to sell it to.
Thank you.
I just want to mention the state revolving fund because that's been a source of a lot of funding that you've used for water and sewer projects. We use a lot of acronyms in this business. So SRF stands for State Revolving Fund. When it's for a water project, it's called the DWSRF, the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, and the sewer projects are called the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. But this is a program that is run by Eagle and the Michigan Finance Authority that takes federal money and gives a low subsidized interest rate for certain communities. This can be a great deal when interest rates are higher because historically the rates on the SRF bonds have been somewhere between 1 5/8 and 2.5%. Right now a lot of them are 2.25%. And that's true whether bonds are at 3 and 4% or when they were up at 8%. So it's a really nice program if you qualify for it. I would say a significant number, if not most of the water and sewer projects you guys have done in the last 10 or 15 years have gone through the SRF program. And, this is usually done through YCUA, but there's an application process. Each year they rate all the communities and then they put out a list and say, here's the communities that qualified this year. And in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of grant money and something they call principal forgiveness, which is kind of like a grant that goes along with that. So if you qualify, it's a very great program because it's at a low rate and you may get some grant funds. When we do an SRF bond, though, they use the word loan, but we like to use the word bond because, again, you have to issue a bond that is legally authorized for the city to issue that they then buy. We know who the buyer is. It's the Michigan Finance Authority. The interest rate's predetermined at whatever that low rate is, but you still have to go through the same steps to issue that bond as if you were going to go and sell it to the public or place it here with the state agency. And again, a lot of the revenue bonds we did in the early 2000s were sold to the state this way, and a lot of the YCUA bonds you've done in the last decade have been done this way as well. Okay, so that brings me to the topic of the night, which is capital improvement bonds. So I understand you have different projects. Let's say that the Public Works building is the topic of the day. And so the question is, why should we issue a capital improvement bond over some other type of bond issue? And what's the process for doing that? I mentioned earlier, it's the most common type of bond. You can use it for a lot of different things. And it's particularly good when you're intending to use tax revenues or other available revenues that don't require some kind of a vote or a tax increase. It's going to be a limited tax bond. It is backed by the city's limited tax full faith and credit. And right now you have, a credit rating from Moody's that I think Reagan had a call with them in the last 6 months that's been confirmed at an A2. Now, every time you go out for a new bond issue in the market, the rating agencies reevaluate the credit and the security. So people say, what's our rating going to be? It's probably going to be the same as the existing debt, but they will look at that each bond issue. And sometimes they do these surveillance ratings every couple of years in order to do that. Again, it doesn't require an election, but there is a referendum right. And what I mean by that is one of the first steps is the city has to declare its intent to issue the bonds. And that's by adopting a notice of intent resolution. And then that is notice is published by the clerk in the newspaper. And the bonds can be issued by a vote, without a vote of the people, unless a referendum petition is signed by 10% of the registered voters and submitted to the clerk's office within 45 days. We call this the referendum right. It's kind of like you can do it without a vote unless the public really wants to have a vote on it and goes through these steps. Once that referendum period expires, then you're free to move forward with the financing when you're ready to, when you know what the project cost is, the structure, and everything else. I'd like to say, this process with the 45-day referendum period could take as little as 90 days or as long as a couple years based upon when you know how much the project is and when you're ready to borrow. So I mentioned the first step is the council adopting a notice of intent resolution. So when do we do that? When you do that is when you know what the answers are to fill into the blank. So there's a few things that need to go into that. The notice of intent resolution is supposed to say what's the maximum amount of bonds to be issued for the project. We say that as a not to exceed X dollars. What is the project for? A description of what the proceeds are going to be used for. What's the maximum duration of the debt? 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. Now, these are parameters. So very often we will say, okay, you think your project is $10 million, but we don't really know. So in this resolution, maybe we use a bigger number and say not to exceed 12 million or 13 million, knowing that you will set the actual number later. But what we don't want to have happen is do the notice of intent resolution at what today's estimate is, because 6 months from now when you bid it, prices can go up. And you don't want to have to go back and repeat this process. So I always suggest let's go with a number that's bigger than what you think, bigger than what the engineer's contingency is, and you guys can always back that down when it comes back to you to actually approve it. The project, I like to be broad. If you're talking about a building, to include, acquire, construct, furnish, and equip a new public works building, including all related site improvements. You want to include what it is that you think you're going to spend the money on. And you don't have to spend on everything in that notice, but if there's anything else that you want, like, oh yeah, we want to do some parking improvements too, like to include that within that so that it's gives you more flexibility on how those proceeds are spent. So once that notice of intent resolution is approved, it directs the city clerk to publish the notice in the paper as a quarter page that says the city council has adopted this resolution, it intends to issue bonds in this amount, and the bonds will be issued without a vote unless a referendum petition is signed by not less than 10% of the registered voters within 45 days. Once that's published, that starts the clock on the 45 days. When it expires, nothing magic happens. It just means that you know that you can go ahead when you're ready to move ahead with the bond issue. And that could be, again, the next meeting, or it could be a year from now, depending on when you need the money. I always like to say that, the project drives the timetable. We don't try to guess what's the best time to sell bonds. We like to target the bond sale for when do you know how much you need to borrow and when do you need the money, so that you have it available. You can, in some cases, spend money early and then reimburse when the bonds are issued. So sometimes you may start a project, but it's important to get that notice of intent resolution approved early, because that's what gives you the ability to then claw back if you spend some money on things before the bonds are actually issued. You can reimburse yourself for the engineering and architecture and those kinds of costs. But if you're going to go out and buy land or start buying equipment or starting construction early, you want to make sure you get that first step done so that you can then reimburse for those costs. So basically, it's then up to the city staff to figure out, let's go get bids, let's figure out what the cost is, et cetera. Once we know those answers, then we come back to you, the city council, to adopt a bond authorizing resolution. This then authorizes the bonds. We may lower that number to what we think it is. Now, sometimes when we get to that point, we may still use a not to exceed number if some of the numbers are fluctuating. It kind of depends on how big a hurry you're in. But the idea is that bond resolution is then going to say how much you're borrowing, what the structure is it 15, 20 years, what the rate parameters, is it a competitive sale, negotiated sale, and then that's the last action item by the city council. So this, from my perspective, has two steps. First, the notice of intent resolution, which is the broad parameters. And then once we know what we're going to do, we come back to you for the bond resolution. The bond resolution then delegates to the city staff, the manager and the finance director, to then go forward and carry out the bond sale. And that means going and applying for ratings, structuring it with the financial advisor, and then picking the sale, going out and selling bonds. And again, if it's a competitive sale, then awarding to whoever's the lowest bidder. Usually the bond closing then occurs roughly 3 weeks after the sale, and you get the proceeds then. So again, that's roughly the process for issuing capital improvement bonds. And again, the project is going to dictate the timing and how long that takes. So that's kind of the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions about bonding in general or this particular process for a capital improvement bond.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was really good. All right, Councilmember Tucson.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. So my question would be, so I understand that, I want to know, like, what are like the criteria that a city would use to like determine what type of bond to, issue to a specific project? Because it kind of sounds like capital improvement is kind of like a catch-all, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so I would say the process you use is very often what we do is, there's various people involved in a project. So you have your engineers or architects who are designing the project or figuring out what you need to build. The bond lawyer, my job as the bond lawyer is to prepare the bond documents, the resolutions, and then at the end I give a legal opinion that says everything was done correctly, it's tax exempt to the investors, and I assist with that process, whether it's with an election or without. The other person that's involved is a financial advisor, a municipal financial advisor. The city has historically used public financial management. They're based here in Ann Arbor, and they are involved in advising on the financial structure, the revenue support to pay it. So I would say the finance team works with the finance director and the city manager to make a recommendation as to the type of bond to issue, and then we come back to you with that. Now, sometimes there may be other considerations and you may have input on that, but generally What we like to do is work with the engineer, work with the city staff, and we come back with sort of a financing plan and proposal, and then come back to you to kick off that process.
Thank
One only question? Okay. Other questions? Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. Talk a little bit about the rating. You referenced the A2 from Moody's, which I believe is an upper medium grade rating. So it's not the highest. I think I've got the scale.
A1, sorry, I said A2.
Oh, a little better.
It is better.
So can you talk a little bit about how that rating then influences interest rates and favorability of?
Yeah, and
borrowing?
I was sketching this out here a little earlier. I don't know if you can see this, but talking about ratings, because I think a lot of people want to know how that works. So there's two main rating agencies, Standard & Poor's and Moody's. You only need one rating. The city has been, its last rating was from Moody's. And so we'll talk about Moody's rating scale, even though I don't like it as well. There's lots of different grades of rating. There's 4 that are considered investment grade, and then there's 4 or 5 that are non-investment grade. The best and highest rating is AAA on both scales. There are very few AAA credits among Michigan municipalities. There's maybe a half dozen to 10 cities and a handful of counties in the state that have a AAA rating. The next main category is what is the AA category. Now on S&P, it's AA plus is the best. It's like school. Plus is better than the regular grade, minus is worse. Moody's isn't that easy. 1 is like a plus, 2 is like a regular A, and 3 is like an A minus. So that's the second major grade is the AA. The third is the A category. And again, in the Moody's system, A1 is the best, A2, then A3. And then each of them have a triple B, or Moody calls it BAA, kind of the same thing. So you were an A2 years ago and moved up to an A1. So that's great. So this, I would say, this AA in the A category is where most Michigan municipalities, you don't want to be down here in the triple B because it doesn't mean you're going to default, but it's a little riskier. And again, very few are up here. So right now you're at an A1. How is that determined? So each of the rating agencies has a very mathematical criteria. And there are some things you have control over and some things you don't. They will look at the demographics and economics of the community. So they look at your taxable values, your income level of citizens, the economic vitality of the region, and that's kind of a demographic thing, which of course you guys don't have any control over that. They look at another category is city management and policies. So they look at things like, do you regularly have, budget reports, and do you adjust that? What are your policies for things like fund balance and debt and other things like that that impact your finances? What's your financial flexibility when it comes to things like your millage rate? So those are some things that you do have a little control over. Another area that they look at is your existing debt and the overlapping debt in your area. So I have some clients that the city may not have a lot of debt, but the schools do. Well, that's a factor when they look at how much is an average citizen paying. So they look at all these criterias, they come up with a scoring system, and based on where that works, that kind of narrows down where you're going to be. So there's no one factor that leads to this rating or that. They all kind of play into that scoring system. So there are things that you can do that may improve that, and there's things that you can do that make it worse. But basically, that's how the system works.
Following up on that line, you have thoughts on the value of a rainy day fund or a budget stabilization fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the things that they look at under the policies are things like they look at as fund balance. You call it a rainy day fund or a budget stabilization fund. But rating agencies like to know that you've got money in case you need money to dip into. They also like to know that you've got flexibility. What a budget stabilization fund or a rainy day fund does is it's a source of money that's there that's set aside for a rainy day, and that is something that's a positive in their scoring system. Now, they often will look at it as what's the percentage of your general fund balance policy versus your annual expenditures from your general fund. So I know that you have a resolution here talking about 90 days. I think of it in terms of percentage. So to me, 90 days is 3 months, which is a quarter of a year. So that's roughly a 25% fund balance policy. That's considered to be a relatively high. 20 to 25% is a very attractive fund balance policy for rating agencies. Now that also means that, you know, they want to see that you're actually hitting that. I know right now, I think 10% is the current base. Yeah. And again, there are cities that are anywhere from 5 to 30%. So there's lots of range within there. But as your question is, how does that impact the rating? I would say that the rating agency would view that favorably, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that would lead to an upgrade.
Thank you.
Further questions?
And then the one other thing, so why do we care about our rating? I didn't answer that question. So the answer is, the higher the rating, the lower the interest rate you're going to get. And, you know, so what that means is, and I can't tell you because the numbers change all the time, but each of those little notches may be what we call 5 basis points, so 0.05%. So it's not like, you know, a AAA would be, you know, 2% lower rate than A1. That's not true. But a AA is a slightly lower interest rate than a single A. A single A at the top, you guys are A1s. That's like, you know, the high end of the A is going to get a lower interest rate than an A2, an A3, or a triple B. So that's really the impact of the rating. And then it depends on what the market is at that time as to, you know, how that works.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for the presentation. Was great to read through this ahead of time. I have a question. I'm not sure it's really to you or maybe somebody on staff, but so we can go through all of this. We've got a better rating. We can issue the bonds. We have a project that seems very appropriate for the capital improvement bonds. But we're also limited by leverage rates. And so if somebody could speak to where we are with that, because if we issue another bond, where does that put us in terms of our limitations in terms of millage rates?
Maybe we tag team this.
Good evening, council member. So per state statute, I think the max is 20 mils. Currently, we're at 17 mils. But as Pat said a while ago, there's these types of bond where it's not going to affect the limit. Was I correct there? Pat, can you explain that?
Well, I figure you asking, do we need to raise taxes in order to pay for this?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think that was the.
so it depends on our budget. So if we don't want to raise taxes, then we would have to get it from somewhere. So we may need to decrease on some spending if that's what the council wanted, or if we don't have a source of revenue, yeah, and then the only way to fund it is through another millage. So we have to increase taxes.
And so we're currently at 17 and a half and the limit's 20 mils. Yeah, I think there's a much more complex answer to that, but yeah.
Yeah. All right, Councilmember Simmons.
Yes. I'm just trying to think through these different things. So, capital improvement can go with catch-all is used, so could go for use for anything like sidewalks and things of that sort. And you were saying that you could do a bond that could have like multiple projects under it. Do they have to be related, or could it be, you know, here's maybe a primary need, but we also have this other need here, and so it makes sense to kind of do them all together?
That is what I meant by that. And so just to give you an example, you know, and I know you haven't done a lot of bond projects, but let's say, you know, the city is considering a building project, a bridge project, and maybe a water main or something. you could, in theory, do a single bond issue for all those projects. And the bridge project could be paid for from Act 51 monies. The building project could be paid from taxes, or maybe, water and sewer if it's for the public works or something. And the water main could be paid for from water rates and sewer rates. So you can combine different projects, and then again, what would be done in those cases for cities that do that is that have a separate debt service schedule for each different project because it has different purposes. The reason you would want to do that is if you told me, hey, we've got 3 different projects we want to bond, I would say, well, let's not do 3 different bonds. You get economies of scale in terms of cost and more attractive bond from an interest rate standpoint by doing one single larger bond than doing 3 separate ones. So that's why I mention that, because if you have more than one project that you may issue bonds for during a year, you might think about whether you want to combine those into a single bond, or do they really have different schedules and timetables that it doesn't make sense. So that's really more of a timing thing. But we would generally encourage you that if you are looking at doing multiple projects with a bond, and I'm going to leave aside the water sewer that is done through the SRF because we can't really combine that with the others. But I'm talking about other projects that it might make sense to combine them into one, and that would lead to cost savings by doing a single bond issue.
And so would that only apply to capital improvement? So for instance, you talked about like the installment purchase agreements for fire trucks and things. That's not necessarily a CIP, but
Yeah, so generally the capital improvement bond is really the one that gives you that most flexibility. But I would say though that, since you mentioned it, if you say, hey, while we're doing this, we also need to buy a really expensive fire truck, you could include that in a capital improvement bond, but you couldn't do it the other way. You couldn't say, oh, we're going to pay for this building or that bridge project, and we're going to do it with an installment purchase. So that's why I mentioned the capital improvement bond is, you can do a lot of different projects within that one type of instrument.
questions? Councilmember Fellows?
I'm gonna just confirm some things I thought I heard. Did you say that we have approximately 30 million bonding capacity for capital improvements?
Yes.
Okay. And what would be like the typical municipal bond interest rate for that versus, you said the state revolving fund is pretty low, 1 to 2%. So what would be like a capital improvement?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I would have given you a different answer 2 weeks ago than
Yeah.
what I'm going to say tonight. So I'll say what I would have said 2 weeks ago, which is right now as a city, and one other thing I want to talk about is duration. So people say, how long do we borrow for? What's the right answer? And so first, there is a limit under state law that you cannot borrow longer than the useful life of the asset. So if you're doing a road that's going to last 10 years, the bond issue has to be 10 years or less. If the fire truck is a 5-year, et cetera. Water and sewer has long lives. So these are sometimes 40-year assets, or buildings generally are 30, 40-year assets. There is a limit of 30 years for most type of bonds. The norm is for water, sewer, or buildings, 20 years is kind of the standard bond issue, maybe 25 if you need a little bit more room for water, sewer, buildings, and for roads and things, 15 or 10 years. So the longer the bond issue, the slightly higher the interest rate. So I would have said that if you'd asked me this 2 weeks ago, rates for a 20-year bond by a city like yours with an A1 rating would have been somewhere between 4 and 4.25%. Now, last week, we saw tremendous volatility in the stock market and the bond market. And with uncertainty leads to higher rates. And it was particularly uncertain, as you know, by watching the stock market. But the bond market also did a lot of weird things. We saw rates go up day by day, 30 to 40 basis points a day, so 0.3 to 0.4%, so that where it was a week ago Monday might have been, say, 420. We were seeing those same types of credits with interest rates up at like 470. So we saw at least a 0.5% increase last week with all the crazy volatility. Now, we actually had a couple bond sales today. Things have come back a little bit, but not as much as they went up. So I would say right now, and when I say, so we saw 20-year bonds from AA and A communities go up to about 460, 470, 480. Now they've come back now maybe 4.5. So I would say that for planning purposes, we don't know where interest rates are going to be next week, let alone where they're going to be in 6 months, maybe when you're ready to do the project. So very often what the financial advisors do is they look at where current rates are, and then we estimate 0.5% higher. So that's the budget number. So I would say that, right now, and we would hone this in with the financial advisors, but it could be anywhere between 4.5 and 4.75%. Could be 5% by the time we get there, or it could be back down at 4.25. So, I'm going to say a range of between 4 and 5%, depending on what happens with the economy. That is if you look back over 30 years of municipal bond rates, that's still pretty low. We hit rock bottom low rates, a couple years ago, but I mean, the rates have been somewhere between 3.5 to 4.25, for most of the last 4 or 5 years. So that's kind of where we've settled, but things are a little uncertain and we don't know where things are going to be. But that's kind of the best answer I can give you in what has been one of the craziest weeks in the bond and stock market in the last, decade.
Understood. Thank you. This makes the, state revolving fund pretty attractive because of the low percentage rate.
If you qualify for it, yep.
Have you seen municipalities do, apply for this and also prepare that this may not be issued? And so basically as a strategy, try one first and then move to the other one.
Well, so the state revolving funds can only be used for certain types of water and sewer projects.
Okay.
You can't do buildings or roads or other things like that. So very often people will apply, see where they come out, and if they qualify, they go that way. But if they're not near the top of the list, then they either have to wait or maybe they sell the bond in the bond market, which has also been done because those resources are, there's lots of communities trying to get that low money. So yeah, very often people will apply, and if they don't get it, they might then need to look elsewhere, or they wait a year and apply a year later.
Thank you.
That's not something for a building.
Any further questions?
Maybe one more, because I think this was presented, the capital improvement bond was presented as one that doesn't require taxing residents more. So I'm trying to understand in what instances would we not, and what instances would we tax? Because hearing from Reagan, and you said that it would require a millage, but I thought probably one of the interests of this council was that this one wouldn't require.
So this is really more of a budget and planning thing, because you don't need to levy a higher millage rate, and you can't levy a millage rate higher than what you're authorized, but you have to find room for it within the budget. So with whether that's using your charter tax levy authority or whether you've got some other funds that could be used for it as well. So it kind of depends upon whether you have room within your budget at your existing charter limit or whether you need to increase that in order to get the money to pay this particular debt service. So that's really kind of a budgeting type question: is there available money in the proposed budgets under the current millage rate, or would we need to raise taxes, or would we use some other funding source as well to offset that? So that's part of the planning process that goes into this.
Thank you.
Did you?
Questions or comments? Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
It was very informative.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, that's a lot to digest. But we'll move into our resolutions. Councilmember Tucson, you have 063.
Yes, so resolution number 2025-063, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the minutes of the April 1, 2025 City Council meeting be approved, and I so move.
Support. Been moved by Councilmember Tucson, supported by Councilmember. Councilmember Simmons.
Hello. I have just a couple of quick updates, which I can send, but they're pretty easy. So one was in the Watts report. I just wanted to specify the surface transportation reauthorization bill, just to make it easier at some other point to come back to that. And then under my council proposed business, when talking about the resident Mark Higbee that died, he actually died in February, but the memorial at EMU was that week. So just to, no, that's just update. Thank you. Thank you.
Councilmember McLean, you had something?
Yes, under the roll call, I believe Councilmember Simmons's name is misspelled.
Thank you.
That's
Needs an S.
Needs an S, you said? Oh, okay. Anything else? Councilmember Fellows?
I should have checked in beforehand, but as I understood it, one of the amendments that we voted on for the reserving city buildings resolution was, I think, Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon asked for the word public to be changed to city, as I remember it. But on the minute, it says it was public. Yeah,
It's a public event.
was that correct,
I don't know if it was.
Mayor Pro Tem?
No, that's new.
Yeah, I think it did. It did go from public to city to make it more specific to.
Oh, I think it's the opposite way, from public event to citywide event.
Yeah.
It just a city, not citywide. I believe that's what it was.
Thank you. Anything further? Seeing none, Clerk, would you please call the roll when you are ready?
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Councilmember Tucson, you have 064.
Indeed. Resolution number 2025-064, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the City of Ypsilanti is one of the poorest cities in the state of Michigan, and 35% of its children live in poverty, and whereas the City of Ypsilanti has a vested interest in improving the lives, economic stability, and well-being of its citizens, and whereas the city recognizes that RX Kids is is a universal program, that provides cash assistance to moms and babies when they most need it. This program stabilizes families by enabling them to maintain stable housing, pay for childcare so parents can work, and provide food for the families overall, strengthening family financial security and improving maternal mental health and well-being. Now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council approves 2-year funding in the total amount of $100,000 for RX Kids to launch the RX Kids program in the city of Ypsilanti, and I so move.
Support.
By Councilmember Tucson, supported by Mayor Pro Tem. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening. I'm going to invite Dr. Neil Weinberg up to join me here at the podium, and he is going to share a little bit about the program with you guys. He's a long-term pediatrician in the area and has some great stories to share with you guys.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here and have the opportunity to explain this to you. Apologize for the mask. I have my own respiratory infection right now that I don't want to share with you, but I can tell you it's not COVID and it's not flu. Don't be alarmed. So RX Kids is a direct cash payment to moms or new families around the time of the birth of a new baby. This program started in Flint and actually went live last year. And when I first heard about it, and I saw that Dr. Mona Hanna was the founder of this, she and I worked together on Michigan Academy of Pediatrics. I was the president, she was a board member, so I've known her for a number of years. And I think most of us know about her work with the Flint lead crisis. So I called her and I said, you know, I've been taking care of these kids in the Ypsi area for over 40 years, actually 43 years. Can we bring this to Ypsilanti? Because there certainly is a need. And so I met with her and Luke Schaefer. Luke is a professor in the School of Public Policy at Michigan and a National Authority on Poverty. And Then we came and met with Katie and some other members of your staff. And the decision was made to, let's try and move this forward. So I've been practicing for over 43 years at the area of Clark and Gulfside and taking care of many of the families in this area, and I've seen many, many families who have been, in poverty. Our practice had 25 to 30% of the patients on Medicaid, and on a daily, if not weekly, if not daily basis. We're always trying to help families with food insecurity, issues having to do with housing, supplies like formula. And you just can't do this kind of work every day and not see the need. Recently, well, in the last year or two, we've had families come to the practice using an Uber or Lyft, and they bring their newborn into the practice, and these babies weren't transported in a car seat. Our practice manager went out and got these people a car seat to take the babies home. And then we have used this with other families since that time. So there's a need. And there's no doubt that the family's greatest vulnerability is the time around the perinatal period, when whatever income there is in a family drops, the baby's born, and it stays down until the families can go back to work, which oftentimes doesn't happen. So RX Kids fills this need by providing a cash payment program without any strings attached for first 6 to 12 months of the baby's life. As you may recall, the American Rescue Plan in 2021 lifted a number of several million kids out of poverty until it was, turned off by the government, and put the number of kids back in poverty to about 12% from about 8% of the low that it had attained. So these programs definitely work. Luke Schaefer's research has shown that the effects of a program like this, the cash payment program in the first year, are long, long lasting, well into adulthood. And it makes a big difference in these families. What happens in these families is there are so many stressors around the time of the baby's birth that there are what are called epigenetic changes to the family's DNA. And these stresses make changes in the DNA. Not that the DNA changes what it looks like, but how it acts. And these become long-term changes. So making these changes early on makes a big difference. This program started in Flint. They've gotten active. They're now up and running in Kalamazoo, the Western UP, and they're also now working in Wayne County. There's a lot of interest, and I think that it's really important that the city get behind this to start. They've shown if the city or the region gets behind the program, all the nonprofits, all the people who are interested in this will donate. So you have to form the NIDUS. And so we're asking you to consider this. And once I think the city's behind it, I am really hopeful that we can bring this program to Ypsilanti.
Thanks, Neil. So just a couple other quick things to let you guys know about the program are that some key findings that they found in Flint were that no low-income moms were evicted during this time period that they had these stipends, and then they also had enough food, and they also had better mental health. As you guys know, I've been working closely with our police department recently with communications, and one of the things I've just observed is how many calls that were going on related to mental health in the city of Ypsilanti. And I think that, clearly mental health is a crisis, right? But I think right here, we're really feeling it. And I think that that's a really important piece of this puzzle. So the program, we estimate that there's roughly 200 babies born in the city each year. TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, supports the first 3,000 for babies born on Medicaid. And then the remaining gap is filled through private and public dollars. So that's where we come in, as well as many other partners. So I've had conversations so far with the Ann Arbor Community Foundation, and they are excited that we are bringing this to you guys tonight. And one of the things that they, as well as Luke and Dr. Mona, have been looking for is a local champion, somebody that's ready to say, yeah, we need this in the area. I don't want it to be another area. I want it to be the city of Ypsilanti. So that's our ask for you guys tonight.
I'd also had the state's committed $20 million for starts
They're contributing.
City manager.
Just to add, really quick, this is something when Katie and other staff brought this to me, I thought that this would be a great use of the mental health millage dollars as what, and it will also help to leverage other dollars that come to the city. So to me, I thought this was a no-brainer. It would be paid out over 2 fiscal years.
2 years. Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Katie, Dr. Weinberg. I couldn't be more pleased to support anything on this agenda tonight or anything that's come before us in the last several months. I think this is money well spent on our end. A couple of quick questions. One is it the expectation that if we do this over a 2-year period that it potentially could continue well beyond those 2 years?
It certainly could. I think that what we've been told about the fundraising efforts is that once somebody jumps in and is willing to be in and buy into this program, that then the money, the private dollars start coming in, right? And so I've looked at the sponsors. Neil and I have sat down and brainstormed additional sponsors. I feel strongly that there's community support and that we just need to show that there's the desire for this to be in the community. And I think that then the money will start to come in. I've also talked about plans to have Dr. Mona come to the Chamber of Commerce and say, hey, this is coming to Ipsy, have some of the business community show up, and then hopefully do that as well. We also have talked about doing a mixer at Zingerman's Roadhouse and inviting some other folks. We'd certainly have a plan to do that. So I can't tell you for sure whether it would be longer than 2 years. My guess is it might be a bit longer than 2 years. But I guess we need to see what the community has stomach for.
I think ideally they'd like to see it, we'd like to see it funded for 5 years. So we'd be talking about 200 families a year for 5 years.
Oh, go ahead.
Good. And also, what are the plans for studying outcomes through this?
Yeah, so Luke was one of my professors when I was at U of M, and he is very much always studying all these things, and they do already have a lot of the statistics that we were sharing with you guys are ones that they're already starting to study. Obviously, after a year, they don't have a ton of the numbers yet. It's a lot of reported data from surveys and things like that with the people involved in the program. But I know that they plan on it. One of the statistics that I forgot to tell you guys was that they have an initial report out of the Flint Genesee Chamber that shows Flint has shown an economic multiplier of 1.5 times the amount that's already been invested into Flint. So for their downtown, they're showing that it would have, out of the $5 million that they've invested, seen $8 million come back to the community. Obviously, some of that goes to big box stores, but they know that it's coming back to the local community as well.
One final point, if I could, maybe a point of personal privilege. I want to thank Dr. Weinberg, and I don't know if you made the connection from my last name, but you have been my son's pediatrician for 19 years, from the time that he was very small to the time that he became taller than me, and he's very happy about that. And I think he has you to thank in part for his height. And I know that I know of your commitment to the community, because I also know that you tried to retire and you failed, and you came back.
Yeah, you're right. So I've been going back a few days a month just because of, knowing families like yours and the kids and, my team there. It's, you're right. I didn't pass that test very well.
Well, you've passed a lot of other tests. Yeah. And also good on the side, a good photographer. As anybody knows, there's a lot of Dr. Weinberg in his office besides just him. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Fellows, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I have a few questions. Is RX Kids a nonprofit or is it a state initiative? Because I was trying to look for this information, couldn't find it.
Yeah, I think it's a nonprofit.
Okay.
It's not sponsored by the state at all. There's support from the state, but it's a nonprofit.
How is the administration of the program being paid for? Is it mostly through?
Well, actually, the way it works, and I'm not intimately involved with this, is there's an organization called Direct Payments that manages the money that comes in and makes the payments out to the families. I think the administrative budget is probably quite small. And the research staff, I think at this point is voluntary. I don't know how much of it's, formally paid. So I'm not actively involved in that part of it, but I know that the overhead's extremely small.
That is one of the other pieces of this puzzle that I think that for the city is great. There's very little administrative burden on us. It's a plug and play program that's ready to go. They're already doing it in the other communities with that format.
How are distributions determined as far as will all the money that the city puts into it go to City of Ypsi residents, or is it going into a state pool?
I can't speak to that exactly, but I think it's all locally aimed. I mean, we know what the costs are locally for those 200 babies a year, and that's what the money will be targeted for.
That's the fundraising that we're doing, and that will go towards city residents.
Yeah, I
We're not
calculated.
bringing the program like to a larger group in Washtenaw County and just to city residents, and that's the estimate. And so then those funds would go back to us.
Okay. And yeah, how are these connections made with the new parents? Is it
Marketing,
Oh,
so
it's
marketing
marketing.
dollars and letting them know that it's here and that the program is here. What's again, I think it's the same way for we get funders, right? We let people know that this is a program that we're doing it. We're excited about it. We start to tell folks and ensure that like other doctors and things like that know about it as well. And then make sure that the moms know that it's an opportunity.
There's a registration period where any mom can register. So, there's no screening, if you will. So anybody who registers in the first 200 to register will get the funds.
One of the other things that Dr. Bona shared with us that she was very excited about is that when we bring this to the community, they'll do a baby march. And so a lot of this sort of stuff will again, it will take on a little bit of a life of its own in the sense that the marketing will just sort of start to roll down the street. But like, again, I think that what we've seen out of Flint is that same thing, right? Like they had this baby march and then they brought in all sorts of folks to have a big party and launch it. So folks are hearing about it and they word of mouth, and then the pediatricians will start to hear and know that it's a resource and make sure that moms know about it as well.
And as far as like other municipal governments paying into this program, what has it looked like in Kalamazoo or in the Upper Peninsula or Flint?
Yeah, I can't give you those exact numbers. I don't know what the seed money was in each place.
Yeah, I don't know what the numbers were, but I know that local governments have, and like the ISDs and the counties and things like that, different levels of government have participated.
I'm sure we can find that out and get it back to you if you want to know.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because, as far as like, is it comparable? Is it different? I think this information is important because, $100,000 for the city of Ypsilanti is kind of a lot. To not have some of those pieces of information, that would be helpful to know if this is kind of an equitable project for our city as well. I am very interested in moving towards direct payments and even resource redistribution to tackle issues of like reparative justice. And dealing with inequity. So I do think this is important. I support it. I just kind of want a little bit more information before I want to vote on it. I think that just requires a little bit more background for how this program runs financially and also how other municipalities have engaged with the program.
Hey, can I ask, so the $100,000 amount over the 2 years is based on the number of babies born in Ypsilanti specifically?
Not the 100,000. So
The amount that we're,
yes,
the
amount
amount that
we
we're putting
raised.
in, I'm
Yes,
sorry,
yes.
the amount that we are looking to raise.
Yes.
So it's specifically to the number that we believe, or, have been born in this community.
Yep.
So we don't know if that has been the rationale for the other municipalities who have done it in terms of what their seed, even if we don't know the number for their seed money, is it the same type of rationale? Do we know around how they decided? No?
I don't know. I didn't.
I don't think it's directly proportional. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like did Flint have, a number of babies per year and then their seed money was connected to it in the same way that this number was presented for Ypsilanti?
We can find that out, but I think each community's costs obviously are different depending on number of babies, right? And 200 is one of the smaller populations. That's much smaller than Flint and Kalamazoo.
I guess that's where I was headed, that I think that their seed was much larger than this number that we are looking at.
I think the seed money is, maybe more philosophical to know that the city has a stake in this, because then you can get the donors. This has been their experience. Once they know the city's invested in it, they have a lot easier time going to the donors and saying, there's a commitment here.
Councilmember Simmons.
Hello, I have a few different questions. Some of them may not, I'm not sure if they're all answerable right now, but I'll just say, like, just to start, that I'm glad that this was obviously launched in Flint, that there's been support, because the state owes Flint a lot more than this, given the government's unjust and discriminatory actions. So I could totally understand why it's, been able to be there and showing success. One of my questions, so here's some just like general checking points. So the 200 birth, is that looking at our total births or births that are within the qualified population for this?
Total.
And so, and as I was reading this, so they said so it says it's a targeted universal program. So it's not necessarily like for everyone, it's within a income range.
No, so it is for everyone. So that's the part of the fundraising that needs to happen is because it is for everyone. And so the portion that's covered is by TANF dollars are for folks who are on Medicaid. And then the other is the portion that's not necessarily covered on Medicaid.
Okay.
So anybody who's pregnant and lives in the city and has a baby can get the funds.
Okay. And so then that is just by whomever to then sign up. So it's not by, so I guess then, so originally I thought that, and then I saw the targeted universal piece and the TANF piece. And then I was like, okay.
Yeah, and so the targeted is the TANF piece, and then
Okay.
the private-public partnership is the other piece.
All right. And so then a question I have is thinking about support to help folks go through the process. And so I know you were saying by promotion, and then it will be by kind of first come, first serve. One of my challenges is that the families that would tend to be first come, first serve tend to have more resources. So how would, in terms of if the point, right, is to help people to not fall into poverty or to help them maintain a certain level of living for their family, kind of how will we make sure that folks in that population would know? So obviously I know you were saying like through doctors and like, the pediatricians and things of that sort. But I guess that would be a question I would have for sure.
So I think, so again, the reason that the estimate is for the 640,000 if we went for 6 months and the 1.2 if we did the full year is to estimate that we'd have full funding for all the babies born in the city of Ypsilanti in a given year, right? Not a first come, first serve, like that all babies could get served, not that some would get a no, right? And that we'd have enough funding to cover everybody.
And then,
and there is the application. So I was just looking at it because I hadn't gone through the process. Like I hadn't looked through the application. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes, but essentially the qualifiers are just that they have a pregnancy. So they have to have something from the doctor that says that they're in fact pregnant. And then it says it's 10 to 20 minutes. So it's a short-ish application process.
Okay. And then I saw there, so it was talking about you said the 6 months versus the full year, and it said the 6 months is preferred, and I don't know, like, why is that preferred?
I think 6 months is preferred was the recommendation just for fundraising purposes. It's not preferred in the scheme of like the entire program. Like I mean, ideally we'd want to get it funded for a year. I mean, the year after childbirth is that high risk time, and I think that we want to try and get the full amount. Do it.
And this is primarily to try to pilot it, since it's like this, I know you were saying like it would be great to have 5 years of funding, but it's not like, it's kind of to try to see like what it could do for, a cohort of a generation, I guess.
That's certainly, I think,
That would be a goal, right?
and I think that that's the goal of the people who are bringing the program with Dr. Mona and Luke. I think that that's what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Make it a program that's much larger and continues to happen.
And personally, I would love to see us do 12 months here, not 6.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, and then there was the questions about how the amount was selected, and right now, so it kind of was just to try to get the 50,000 per year was mainly, it wasn't like stipulated necessarily that it had to be that amount to get started.
No, I think that was mostly a staff decision, and I think that we looked at like what we thought could happen, as well as an amount that felt like the city was in, and had some skin in the game, for lack of a better.
And then one of the things, the funding source, so you were saying that it would come from the public safety and mental health millage fund monies?
That is a place that we could get it from. I mean, typically we could just pull out a general fund as well.
Mm-hmm. And then the other question I have is, so like the timeline for so like kind of why is this coming to us now versus, in a couple of weeks when we'll be in budget presentations?
Why now? I heard that it was expanding, and I got real excited, and I sent Dr. Mona and Luke an email and said, hey, how do we bring this to Ypsilanti?
Mm-hmm.
So and then I went to the city manager, and he recommended either the end of May.
Well, and I'd also say time is of the essence, not to create pressure, but when I was talking to Luke about this last week, he said, it's great if you could make it happen, but we have a lot of people lining up that want to do this. So they only, they have so many resources and so many places they can bring it live. And so I said, keep us at
So they only can do like, yeah, because they're like
Keep us
trying to,
at the
they're
top.
like, yeah, they're kind of expanding like
Yes,
community by
they're
community.
expanding really rapidly. And, we have as great a need as any place in the state.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what I want to hear, and I think that like that's my concern, is that I think that another community could likely see the opportunity and jump at it. And again, they can, and I hope they do. I hope that all the babies in Michigan can get this, but I think City of Ypsilanti babies need it.
Mm-hmm. And I know I was like, oh, maybe Luke will be on, but because I know that his specialty is around like poverty and families. My kid, her first book was living on almost nothing, $2 a day. In 2017, when she was born, I was just reading that out loud. But it just makes me think about just like other interventions that we should be looking at for universal stabilization. And yeah, just recognizing that this is one population of folks, but we obviously have needs for a lot of folks that, don't have children, or their children might, already be here, right? And just thinking about how we would think about using our funds in support of other challenges as well.
I think one thing, though, to consider is, and I think Luke can get you the information. I mean, he sent me a paper like this, with the history of these kind of cash payments and the support and how long, the duration of the effect and the value of it. And it's pretty convincing. I mean, it's been done a number of places around the world, and it has a definite positive effect. And that's not to say that other programs wouldn't be helped as well, but I think there's a burden of proof that's been met internationally with this.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's been a couple of different pilots, in Ann Arbor and in our county around even just like universal basic income and things like that, which are, doing the same kind of thing, right? Like direct assistance and cash payments. So I definitely support those kinds of things.
Councilmember Keen?
I do just have a few questions. I know you mentioned people that were on Medicaid. And so most of the times from my experience, when people are on Medicaid, sometimes they don't have that prescription bill. And so in the presentation, it says that mothers would receive prenatal prescription of $1,500. If their prescriptions are already covered, would they still receive this funding, the 1,500 and the 500?
Yes. 1,500 is prenatal. 500 a month starts after, but yes.
And also, what happens if a parent has more than one child? Is it still the same?
You mean if they have one like in the 3rd year or the 4th year of the program, or
Or twins?
good question. I don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question. Like I think it's still just the
Yeah, I think it's
I think it's still just the monthly
It's
stipend.
one pregnancy.
Yes,
Yes.
one pregnancy, and it's treated as a pregnancy, not as a. I do have a couple of Dr. Mona was able to email me back some of the answers to members.
Get some other
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
Member Jim, you had something?
Yeah, I'm not clear that the prescription question was, that the word's being used in the same way. You know, if we can clarify that at some point. So it seems like a reasonable program. I mean, the idea that you better the outcomes for people in poverty. I share a lot of the same concerns as my colleagues have already mentioned that. One of the recommendations, well, several of the recommendations from the Flint program is to take this, this is marketed as a no strings attached, but the recommendations from Flint is put a lot of strings on this. And it's like, so where does that come? It's been a year in the Flint program, and they have all these recommendations that change that. And is that going to be a barrier? And how do we assess that in terms of, and then who determines what those strings are? Is that something that's up to us, or is that up to the plug and play people who run the program?
So what strings are you referring to in Flint?
Well, they made all these recommendations on how to change the thing and the information to gather and things like that. I mean, there was a whole sheet.
So in that you're reading in the Flint Chamber.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that those were just recommendations that the Flint Chamber is making, and so it's not actually the program, like the program in and of itself.
Got it.
So that's just that's ways that they, as economic development organization, see that that they could track better some of the economic development return on the funds being invested. Does that make sense?
Right, but so if they're doing that, I guess I'm really curious about how that's gonna work if they're.
And I don't think that I've not heard from Dr. Mona or from Luke that they intend to make any changes to add strings. The whole point of the program is that it's an easy application. It's a quick application that the only things that they're verifying are that there is a pregnancy and that they're having a child. And that's the only information that certainly they're doing surveys and things like that to track success rates and things like that, but that's all obviously voluntary after the fact.
And I did ask them because I've had some conversations with people who I hope would be donors, and they would ask sort of the same kind of question, like, how do we know where the money's going?
Right.
And Luke's response was, we haven't really tracked that, but we haven't seen any abuses. So figure, you need diapers, you need food, you need to pay gas, you need more food. I think they just feel inherently that it's being used for those purposes. I don't think they've tracked it to that level.
Again, it's surveys results of saying, what did you use the payments for in this last year kind of thing. And people are reporting food, diapers, formula, baby needs, rent.
I have just a couple more questions. That was one of them. So, thank you for that one. I was wondering, so it sounds like everybody is approved as long as they're pregnant. Everybody gets approved, but we do want to make sure we are targeting those families that really, really need it. So that's one thing we want to make sure that is happening. But my question is, if someone in the city of Ypsilanti has a baby, I don't know if you guys have access to that information, but if they had a baby and they didn't apply, is there a way we can get access so we can encourage them to apply? Or if we know they're pregnant?
So I'm guessing that the Medicaid moms, like they're getting the information because they're on Medicaid and they can get the information because it's from the TANF program. And so that's how they're getting the access to it. It's the other moms that have to specifically like seek it out a bit more, right? Like to know that there's a program going on in the community and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think like
They're already
Council
receiving
Member
public
Simmons said, sometimes those are the people that don't have access to the information is those that really need it. So that is just really one of my concerns.
So you're asking about enrollment after the fact, after you've had.
Well, or if we know a person is pregnant, how do we reach out to them so they don't miss this opportunity?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we market it. I think it would be.
Yeah, we'll
whoever
continue to market
markets
it.
it.
And anytime during that year, they could register for the program. So if they had a 6-month-old, they could still register for the program.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't want. You're done this time. Okay. I didn't want to break it.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Simmons.
Just right quick, because I mean, not that I know that there was that you have to get something from a doctor to say you're pregnant, which I think most people probably could do, but I was just wondering too, I mean, you know, whether it matters if a person does like home birth or works with a midwife or anything like that, whether they would be able to also.
Yeah, I think that anybody that they're working with could
Mhm.
provide that documentation.
And then I can't remember, this is just like extending what Councilmember King was saying, was asking about, but yeah, so then if a person does give birth, can they enroll at any time within the time period that is being funded?
Yes.
So I have a couple things I want to share or say. So the first thing is, I don't know if you knew this, but this week is Black Maternal Mental Health Week in Michigan. Well, you know, okay, so this is perfectly timed.
That's why I brought it.
Okay. Nobody else saw that.
You know, I try to like give it to
I
you.
know.
Be a softball.
And so, you know, just to name some things, I think we're asking the right questions in terms of, you know, being good stewards. But also reminding folks that, you know, Black babies are almost 4 times as likely to die from complications related to low birth weight than their white counterparts. Black women are 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy related causes than white women. Typically, our folks of color have issues with transportation, housing, or housing insecure. And so this is to me a tool in support of one population of folks at this moment in time. I think there are plenty of issues that we need to face within our community and just, you know, across the country. But from Mayor Neely's information from Flint is that the families that were identified as low income, none of them were evicted who participated in this program. They paid their rent or mortgage in full. There's all these positive impacts from this program, and they served over 800 mothers, I believe, and met like a $2 million funding goal. So huge. But I think, you know, in terms of finding other tools to support folks, to me, this is really an opportunity for us to meet people where they're at in a different way, especially with direct cash payments, because even with the questions around how did someone spend the money? Well, ultimately, the way I look at it in my brain is whether I spent the money that I got from RX Kids on the car seat or I spent that on something else that I needed, but then I had additional funds to spend on the car seat. So either way, it went to, you know, the needs of the family and the baby and the mother. And so I think, you know, as we think about this and ways to utilize our funds, this is a small portion that would be asked, you know, for the city to contribute in something that is sprawling for our community and a need in our community. And so I do think there are questions to be answered. But I just wanted to like lay that out there that we know, I think all of us probably know families that could benefit from this, particularly thinking about Ward 1. I know I would have no problem, just like we were talking about solar panels, I have no problem knocking doors to talk about this with the families in Ward 1 and across the city, specifically because we know there is a need. It's similar to why, U of M's health system coming over here on Michigan Ave is so important, right? Access, transportation, proximity. And I'm at Park Ridge often, and there are many needs. Um, Wilson Davis, Camila Wilson Davis, they hosted a Black maternal mental health symposium this weekend over at Park Ridge, and I was able to attend that with Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist and some other presenters. And I mean, the number of pregnant moms that were in the space that were local, right, from just New Park Ridge Homes, Hamilton Crossing. I was surprised, right, because you don't see everybody every day, but in one space, new moms talking about their lived experiences and their near-death experiences, and the hopes and dreams and wishes that they had, if they had, increased financial support. And so I'm just naming that to say this is an area of need, and I hope that council, while we're kind of dissecting some of these pieces, can think about the impact they can have, because one of the things that I would love for us to do, and we talk about it often, is how we want to focus on the youth. But starts with the moms and the babies, right? If we're trying to fortify our community and give people an opportunity to thrive. And we want everyone in Ypsilanti to thrive. And so, I am in full support of figuring out how to do this and how to get in front of other folks who want to help, raise funds and partner with the AAACF and all of that to try to make this happen, because it's very important, I think, for our community. I mean, we know this, and I don't know when we'll have another opportunity where funds will be available for us to partner and only have to kick in a small amount in comparison to the impact that it'll have across our city. Councilmember Fellows?
You said you had some answers back. Okay.
So it looks like all of the communities all the local municipalities did contribute funds. I looked also on this little thing, and they're all listed on there too. So they did all give upwards of 500,000 to $7 million. Some of it was from opioid settlement dollars. Some of it was from
ARPA.
COVID dollars too. Yeah. And then admin and operations of cash transfers is 10 to 15%, and they're only asking communities to only provide 10% above the cash transfer amount. So that $640,000 number adds a 10%. They cover any of the other additional costs that they have to manage the program. So 10%.
Thanks.
Thanks,
I know, right? She's on it. She's quick. She's a quick emailer. So I was like, let me just try and see if I can get an answer.
Yeah, I also just want to add, I agree with everything the mayor says. And I do, again, want to move away from kind of more management systems where money isn't given out or resources aren't given out, like the foster system comes to mind, and more to direct payments. I also want to be careful about just throwing money at nonprofits, though. So this is why it's very important to me to understand what the structure is of the nonprofit and how much is eating up an admin, because most nonprofits that I've been around, because I've worked in the nonprofit industry for 20 years, it's most of the money is an admin. So I do wonder about that. After 2 years of it, we get another resolution, it's like, well, you approved this before, so just, do it again. But I would have the same questions about how effective it was, and, also like administrative costs. And I also just want to uplift something Councilmember King was talking about as far as the marketing-based approach to outreaching folks, because I do share those concerns as well. And, I think of Dorsey Estates, where it's like really awesome that 7 municipal workers are there, a testament to, having housing that actually accommodates city workers, city employees. But also it kind of points out that, the most plugged in people, municipal workers, got in there first in the lottery. And so I do think we need to work extra hard to combat those trends where it's just the most access, the most politically connected folks getting the benefit all the time.
I think that one other thing is the public benefit piece of it. So like those are folks who are getting public benefits, so they are plugged into that system in a way, and so they're getting they're going to get that communication from folks they're going to say, hey, this program applies to you. Make sure that you get into it. So hopefully those people will actually get the information more so than the other people will get it. Is what my understanding of it is. And then, I wanted to also, if I can figure out how to get a UBI here and test it, let's do it. I hear you. I absolutely hear you. I think that, yeah, I mean, the cash transfer system is proving that it works and it lifts people out of poverty.
Are there questions or comments? Call the roll.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
If I could add one more thing before moving on, there's certain requirements that you have to use the opioid funding. I did not know that we could use it for this, so that could definitely be directed to that.
Great, thank you. All right. You have something before we go?
Yeah, just to make a comment. Looking at this list of contributors and thinking about the budgets of any one of those versus our city budget, and the whole point of we're making seed money, but at any point these people could have
Pay for the whole thing.
done that.
I agree with that. I agree.
Yeah, facts. Facts. All right. People, is everybody okay?
Yeah, we're all leaving, sir.
Well, we're just gonna keep going. Councilmember Fellows, you have our next resolution.
All right. I believe it's this one. Resolution number 2025-065, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas on April 28th, 1971, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, went into effect, promising every worker the right to a safe job. And whereas every year on April 28th, communities and work sites around the world honor friends, family members, and colleagues who have been killed or injured on the job. And whereas the U.S. Department of Labor and the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that Michiganders have died while on the job an average rate of 147 people per year over the past decade. And whereas the 2024 National Census of Fatal Occupational Injuries found a worker died every 99 minutes from a work-related injury. And whereas it is appropriate to honor the memory of the courageous and dedicated members of Michigan's labor force and have been injured or disabled or have died as a result of workplace accidents. And whereas we remember those who have died in workplace catastrophes, suffered occupational related diseases, or have been injured due to dangerous conditions. And whereas recognition of the integrity of Michigan's workforce and its achievements on behalf of the economic growth of our state is necessary. And whereas the City Council of Ypsilanti wishes to pay tribute to the workers who have died or been injured or disabled in workplace accidents. We honor the contributions of Michigan's workforce and call for increased workplace safety. And whereas the City Council of City of Ypsilanti renews our efforts to seek stronger workplace safety and health protections, better standards in enforcement, and fair and just compensation. And by dedicating ourselves to improving safety and health in every city workplace. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of this legislative body declare April 28th, 2025 as the City of Ypsilanti, Workers' Memorial Day in the City of Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I so move.
Support.
By Councilmember Fellows, supported by Councilmember Simmons. Hopefully this resolution, I brought this forward, it speaks for itself. But when we've approved this in the past, but when this came about this year, I thought about DPS, right? And like worker safety, what we don't want to see, and our commitment to making sure that, our employees and laborers are working in safe conditions and in remembrance of folks who, I know stories and other things in our community, not city folk, but who have, lost their lives in their line of work, trying to keep things safe for others. And so I think it's really important to lift and honor people's commitments and the risks that they take to keep us safe as well. Any comments or questions?
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all. Councilmember McLean, you have 066.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas sound fiscal management dictates the need to set aside funds in case of economic downturn, sudden revenue loss, or other unforeseen emergencies. And whereas the City of Ypsilanti has established a budget stabilization fund to be used in cases of sudden revenue loss. And whereas the Government Finance Officers Association, GFOA, the body which establishes standards for municipal accounting and finance, recommends the establishment of a budget stabilization fund and further recommends that the fund contains resources sufficient to cover at least 2 months of general fund revenues and more than 2 months under certain circumstances, including when municipalities are highly dependent on a single source of revenue. And whereas the City of Ypsilanti is highly dependent on property taxes to fund ongoing operations. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Ypsilanti establishes a target level for its budget stabilization fund of 91 days of general fund revenue as measured by the last fiscal year for which complete revenue figures are available, and I so move.
Or
By Councilmember McLean, supported by Councilmember Tucson. I'll give you the floor.
Thank you, Mayor. We've talked a lot about this, as I've mentioned earlier, starting from the time when we first established this budget stabilization fund, that it would make sense to figure out a target, figure out how big do we think it should be. And to date, we have not done that. I should be clear that this does not move any money at all in or out of that fund. It simply says this is a goal, this is a target, this is where we think it ought to be. I've also mentioned in the past that the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, suggests that 2 months is a bare minimum, but that cities, municipalities, jurisdictions that are highly dependent on single revenue source consider being having a longer or larger window for that stabilization fund, and that certainly describes us. And so this is my suggestion that we do it at about 3 months or 91 days, specifically in the resolution. And then we still need to have that conversation that we've talked about having, but we have not yet fully had it, about exactly when would we withdraw money from the stabilization fund. But I think that the presentation we had a little earlier tonight on debt service kind of alluded to that, at least indirectly, when he talked about the idea that there are ebbs and flows in the economic cycle, that revenues go up and revenues go down. That's been referred to as the business cycle or the economic cycle for years, and those cities that do establish a robust budget stabilization fund are able to weather those storms a lot better. They don't get in a situation where they have to do sudden and dramatic layoffs or massive cuts. So the goal is to even that out when the tough times come. This is no different from what would be recommended for a household budget, that you have money set aside in case of an emergency. And so my suggestion is that we adopt this resolution to say that we should have at least 1/4 of a year's worth of revenues available in that emergency fund. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Comments, questions from council?
Can I 1/4 million? Oh, okay.
3 months.
And then, Mr. McGowan said that that's like, going back to bonds, they like to see that. Wasn't that the number, about 1/4?
He was
20.
saying that it was like high, it was like, he said 20 to 25 is like, night, you know.
Nice. They see between 5 and 30, he said, across the state, but 2025 looks good. Or something like that.
Although he also said that was a high amount, so.
Well, yeah. Councilmember Simmons?
Yes, thank you. So I have a couple of different kinds of questions, I think. One of them is it talks about, like some of the reasons why you might want more than 2 months. And it says like that we have a heavy reliance on property tax funding. So I have a couple of questions around that. One is just in terms of thinking about what kinds of things we would see that would see cause a major drop in property tax funding. So it was making me think about different things that would make the city have to reassess taxable value on properties that then wouldn't cover our expenses. But I just am interested to hear, like, what are the things that we would expect that would severely hamper our property tax funding?
If I, the, something similar to the 2008 housing crisis, that had a huge impact on the city's budget as values of homes were dropping. And that's where a lot of our cushion it was taken from. And then we didn't really start establishing a fund balance until 2014. When I started, it was still very low, and then it's grown from there. So housing market can have a great impact on our revenue stream.
Yeah, so then that leads, so one of my questions off of that, because that's exactly like I was thinking, like a real estate bubble bursting, which is what happened. So then I think about, well, what are things that the city can do to help protect us from such a bubble? If there's things that we could do proactively to try to stabilize our real estate market.
It's not really something that a city our size would have the ability to do. That's more based off the market, which we can't have a tremendous impact on.
That's interesting. And then I guess another question I have around that are things that city can do to make our revenue portfolio more diverse. So what are other things that we can be doing to diversify our portfolio?
So the three main funding sources for a city are taxes, fees, and fines. Fees have to be set per bolt. Fines we could make higher, but our funding streams are fairly limited. We have some investments that had higher yields last year, but the overwhelming majority comes from taxes.
So then would that mean that every community is highly reliant on property taxes for their funding? So I'm just wondering, because it was just pulled out specifically. And so I'm like, so that doesn't necessarily make us more at risk than any other place.
Correct. And that's why you see situations like Detroit when they had to get when they were facing bankruptcy, or Highland Park, or cities like that. So if you have that cushion, you can maintain your operations and weather the storm until the market rebounds.
Although, yeah, as you're saying that it took sometimes years, right, for the market to rebound. So, so depending on what caused the volatility. Do you want to? I have another thing about you want to answer. Yeah, that's fine.
I would maybe also mention, so I think you're referencing the GFOA documents or their guidelines. They're of course a national organization. So while it may be the case that Michigan cities are highly dependent on the property taxes, not all cities are. A lot of other states where they may be more dependent on income tax, for example.
So like, are you naming things that that we are not, that Michigan cities are not open to, that in other states are available to them?
There are certain cities in Michigan that have an income tax. We tried to pass one, I think, in 2012, but it failed. We tried to pass two.
Yeah, I think twice.
So that failed. So we don't have that funding mechanism.
So one of the things, and I in general, obviously I believe in like good balance and thinking about our budgeting in like really smart ways. One of the things that I just like always want to like balance out, which is like the amount of money that we put into a place that we can't touch or can rarely touch. with things that we need to do, in the present term, that also shore up long-term needs as well, but that take funding now. And so in thinking about how we would be able to really negotiate, how we hold those different things. So an example that I'll just say, because it was just like new information yesterday. During the Sustainability Commission, we were talking about trees. We love talking about trees. But one thing that Director Wessler had noted was that the city does not fund tree replacement. And so this has come up in a couple of conversations, comments from public comment. So if the city does not fund tree replacement, but we cut down trees, then we will soon be in a place where we have very few trees, and understanding like all the implications of what goes along with that. And which I won't go into right now. But I just see this as like, these are the kind of trade-offs that then we wind up holding. So, do we put more money into something that we can't use just in case? And or how do we manage needs that we know that we have that we also are not funding, that both can impact, now, but also long-term? Funding a tree program is actually a long-term priority as well. And so I just wonder about how we will really manage that. One is, having the stabilization fund already, which is great. But then how is that going to come up into how we make other decisions? So I don't know if there's more thoughts in terms of, why having more funds when we have already a limited budget that we're able to access. I think that obviously when you have a lot more funds, it's easier to save a lot more. When you have fewer funds, it's harder to save more because you need those funds to be in circulation. And so kind of, what are folks thinking in terms of how we would balance those different priorities?
Um, this is my own personal approach. It's not something that others may or may not subscribe to, but I think of a strong financial underpinning as very foundational for any city, that there are dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of things that we could all put our heads together and say merit support. But it's really hard to do any of those things if you don't have that strong foundation, strong finance system, and a budget that is can support lots of programming, lots of bodies, lots of people. So this is, in some ways, this is to me what underpins everything else is strong financial management. The other thing I would mention is that I weighed whether or not it made sense to do something even more than 3 months, and so I wondered whether 4 months was as a former finance director. That certainly would have made me at the time, and maybe would make Reagan feel even more secure, knowing that we've got a strong support in case the financial winds do change. And we are in a time of, as on council mentioned, tremendous volatility. And so I think that foundation is essential. I say that while also absolutely acknowledging that there is a lot that we could do that would pay benefits long into the future by way of programs as well. Thank you.
And how much money? So the way we currently have it at 60 days, is that correct? What we budgeted during our last budget?
Yes.
What we had at the time that we moved the last allocation, we had originally, you'll recall, we had originally put in 2 million. We put in an additional 1.2 million, and at that time, by my calculations, that took us to 51 days. so a little bit less than 2 months. Reagan may have updated figures, but I believe that number has increased slightly because of some investment income from that. So I don't know if you've got updated figure, but I think we're probably in the 51 to 55 day range.
Increased roughly $100,000.
So
3.3 million.
is what we currently have. And so what we're trying to add is almost by that is almost trying to double the amount, just a little less than double
Correct.
the amount.
Which is only currently 15% or so. So in terms of what he was saying, of 25% is a good target, we're below or at or below 15%.
You're talking about with the
what the-
51 days.
60 days is
Mhm. Yeah, well, because the other one's at 10%. That was the baseline from the GFAO, I think. It was 10%. Minimum wasn't so much on number, like days, just like the percentage was 10%. And so we're continue working our way up. But okay, that's all my questions for now. Councilmember Fellows.
Yeah, I was hoping to hear from the finance director if this is, easily within our capacity with all of our commitments. And, if there's any concerns within the staff for doing this kind of change. And the other thing is more of a comment, which is I could see this being discussed during budget season. So we're kind of factoring all the other potential amendments and changes. I support it in general just because it seems like it goes well with the idea of potentially increasing our capacity for getting revenue in the future. But I just want to see how it fits in with the rest of the budget as well.
And before Reagan goes up, this resolution isn't associated with any funding. So council could really devise a plan or a finance strategy on how you would like to make this commitment.
Yep. So I do agree that this is very foundational for the city. We really need some for our emergency fund, which is usually it's 3 to 6 months. And I think having it at 90 days, it's like our bond council said, it's also an attractive number for when we're gonna borrow, but it's also for security for us, like in case of a downturn or any emergency, that we're not gonna lay off any of our people, or we have some money where we can draw from. So this money is just being set aside. So it's not like money that we cannot use for any other purpose. 'Cause in the future, if council decides, I think that's going to be a different resolution. But if council decides we want to move this amount of money to something else, it's just there sitting in our budget stabilization fund, and we may still use it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what I would say about this is the same, that this doesn't actually talk about any money. It's a target that we're trying to get to. And so I support 91 days. But I think there's a bigger conversation to be had about how do we want to get to that. And then the one that we've already shared that we need to have, how do we take money out of it if we need to? What triggers that? And so to me, the 91 days and wanting to have that security blanket is, I support that fully. It's more about when do we use it and how do we get there as a conversation. Are there comments or questions? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon,
yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember Simmons, you have 067.
Whereas council members Simmons and Fellows have submitted a request to use the Freight House for a Ward 3 Town Hall, and whereas council policy allows council members to use the city property for non-political events, and whereas community events are allowable without cost other than the cost of the attendant, Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of the City of Ypsilanti approve this request and allow council members Simmons and Fellows to use the Freight House without fee per policy. And I so move.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Simmons, supported by Councilmember Fellows. What count?
I'm just trying to facilitate getting the paper done, right? I don't know.
I'm cool with it.
Okay. All right, the city manager?
Not much to add. This was a request by the Ward 1 representatives.
Ward 3.
Did I say Ward 1?
You did.
I'm
I'm
sorry. Ward 3.
One is always at the top.
No, I don't believe that.
So the last time the fee schedule was approved, community events had to pay for the attendant that was required to be there. This would be a $75 cost that would be waived.
Yeah. Okay. Comments, questions? I know there's probably 100. I hope not. I'm kidding. That was a joke. All right.
Well, let me get my list.
Get your list. Look. Okay.
We're gonna do a meeting on May 8th. So Ward 3 and beyond, you're invited.
Okay, well, seeing none, please call the roll.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Councilmember McLean, you have 068.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the City of Ypsilanti has an interest in beautifying neighborhoods, including street medians, and whereas there are two well-established pawpaw trees planted in the median on Wallace Street between Pearl and North Congress Streets, and whereas these trees are native to the area, and whereas these trees contribute to the beautification of the broader community, and whereas these trees were planted in about 2020 and would probably not survive relocation, and whereas these trees are not on the city's list of approved trees and were planted without city approval and are therefore tagged for removal, but whereas there are neighbors committed to maintaining the health of these trees and to ensuring that they do not pose a safety hazard to vehicular or pedestrian traffic in the area, therefore be it resolved that the city shall make an exception to the code for these pawpaw trees, allowing them to remain because they are already established, are not posing an impediment to vehicular traffic, and have a community group and or resident willing to maintain them, and be it further resolved that this resolution shall not be precedent setting for other trees not planted in accordance with the city's code of ordinances. I so move.
For
Then moved by Councilmember McLean and supported by Councilmember Fellows. Are there any comments or questions?
You go ahead. No, go ahead. I have a comment.
I don't have any issue with this resolution on its face. I would just like to have it slightly amended to request staff enter in or negotiate a licensing agreement for the trees, just because currently as it stands, as we are the responsible party, we have all the liability. So it would just codify, what these residents have already committed to do.
What do you mean, I guess, like,
It would just be an agreement for this.
like
If
this
the thicket
MOU
gets to
kind of
grow,
thing?
yeah, something like that, an MOU.
Mhm.
Just so it's clearly delineated what must be done and recourse to rectify any issues.
Yeah, I think that goes and that kind of connects with one of the things that I was going to say, which is that I know when Councilmember McLean and I were talking about this, one of the things we were talking about is like generally a more thorough policy around trees and like a process. I'm interested in things that are kind of low barrier, but also that could be clear, and also like a process for, what happens, over time, and things like that. And so one of the things that I did then was reach out to Ward 3 resident, her name is Sibby, who had expressed interest in this, actually before these issues kind of cropped up. And so I was able to get back in touch with them, and we met to talk a little bit about ideas and what might be a process to have folks who, do work in this area. So Sibi does tree work. And to think about what a process could be, so as you're saying, like, okay, there could be people can, you know, um, um, be able to say that, we'll be responsible or whatever that process is. So I'm definitely interested in a fuller kind of policy in general. And then also that would, also get at, replacement and things like that. And one of the things that I imagine is, especially as, our general systems fail, then one of the responses that community has is to fill in those gaps and to find other ways to provide care in community. And one of those I imagine would be through food bearing trees. So I think it would make sense for us to actually think about and move on this, in a timely fashion. And the other thing I'll just say, which we'll share more information as we get closer, but Civi has also agreed to kind of do some different kind of, some programming, some education and things like that. So we actually set a date for our first event, which will be June 29th in Prospect Park. And it'll be something to talk about tree identification, being able to think about what you look for to understand whether a tree is under stress or not, and like some of the different things it might need in order to deal with that stress, and things of that sort. So that will unveil as it goes. And if other folks are interested in connecting with folks thinking about that or doing that, then you can feel free to reach out, and happy to connect folks together.
I can add one thing. I think the licensing and if what council wants to do with a further ordinance down the line, this is just my response to just this one thing. I had conversations with Councilmember McLean earlier today that we see this as a specific to this one issue. There's going to be a greater amendment to our ordinances to clarify street trees in the medians, so we can kind of combat this from happening again.
Well, I guess I would say I don't think we're going to combat it from happening again. I think it's going to happen more.
Right.
So
mine wasn't to combat the
issue.
Yes.
Okay.
The issue, not necessarily that.
Okay.
The issue from rising.
Yes. Let's not be in fights with our neighbors. I like that idea. Mayor Pro Tem?
I agree. I think this jumps the gun in a way, because we've had these conversations about how do we encourage community involvement, plantings, things like that. That's all great. There's another side of this, and saying that this doesn't set a precedent, I don't. You can say that, but time is of the essence. These things are slated for removal. I question whether removal is not an option or transfer is not an option. But that being what it is, I understand the timeline for these two particular trees. And to avoid this happening again, in terms of, I look at this as a private taking of the public commons. And so that to me is an issue. People planted trees on property they didn't have control of. We have things later on this agenda where a property owner is having has easements with the city that they've put money into, and it's their own property. One of the people that showed up for the previous meetings was talking about a peach tree on her property. There's different levels here, and when I showed up at the social for this, I asked the specific question of the person who planted the trees: why didn't you plant this tree on your own property? And there was no answer. And did you contact the city about planting this tree in any way, shape, or form? No. So to me, I look at it and it's if we were talking about any other thing, people attach their emotions to the pawpaws and things like that. It's just like if this were a mining company and they publicly took resources from the public commons, we wouldn't be having this kind of conversation. I look at this as this was a taking of public common. So I've been really struggling with this one. You know, it's just like, and I don't want this to be, and it's, you know, as we say, this is, you know, we don't want this to be a precedent in terms of we can say we're not going to make more exceptions, but in my own experience in the city, there have been other situations like this, like the community gardens that were on the property that is now Dorsey Estates. That got removed. It was the same thing. It was people set up something without consulting anybody else, and there was a mixed reaction within the neighborhood about whether that was what they wanted that property to be used for. And so without a license for this, I wouldn't support this without a license, to make sure that this is in, you know, that care is in place and that the city's not liable. Overall, I think the idea of planting, you know, my own home, you know, through the Sustainability Commission, I hooked up with somebody to plant a garden that was accessible to people passing by, and local apartment dwellers harvested that food. So I'm all about that. But on the face of it, I just see this as a private citizen taking public commons and using it for their own use. And although the other side of this is that most of the people in that neighborhood really support that. And that's great. I like that. But I think we need to create that process so this can be done in a way that we get input from all the community and not just two people who decided to plant trees in something that wasn't theirs.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight that, you know, that Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon brought up the fact that the neighbors have been pretty supportive of the effort, and there has been quite a bit of organizing around it. There's this great zine, Save the Pawpaws, that came out of that effort. And it lays out a lot of like neighbors, a lot of folks that we know that are in support of the project. And, you know, they specifically highlight that these were planted on public rather than private property to serve as a community resource. So it's not really private individuals that are just going to use the pawpaws, but it's meant to be, the intent is to be publicly, you know, collectively stewarded. And so it's not, you know, they say in the very beginning of this zine that, you know, it's not our pawpaws, it's the neighborhood as a collective, and that for decades residents have beautified medians, planted gardens, hosted community events, and done these things organically. And this is another instance of that. And I agree with you that there's situations in which someone just takes uh, public land for their own personal use, which I guess I'm reminded of like Riverside Park, the fence debate. So that's not for community use. It's specifically anti-community, I would say. So I think it is. We have to be careful to frame this as, you know, a private use situation. I do think, you know, I want to see more of this in the future. So I don't really care about the licensure route right now. Personally, I will support that if that's what we want to do for now, but I'm more interested in opening up our ordinances to allow for more community stewardship, and especially since we don't have a tree budget, you know, we want residents to maybe fill in and plant trees. And since this issue has come up, I have been noticing so many trees and bushes in public medians. They're actually everywhere. So it's kind of interested. This is, you know, these were the ones that kind of got targeted, but in my own neighborhood, there's many, and they're really well taken care of by the nearby residents as well. So I have a lot of faith in our community to, you know, put care into the environment around us. So I want to extend that to the pawpaws and more.
Thank you. I just want to say I do kind of agree with Steve, Mayor Pro Tem, simply because for my council proposed business, I'm going to talk about residents in Ainsworth Circle who want to start a garden. And although it will be for the community, they can't just do it. And in my opinion, I would assume if they just did it, it would be problematic. So I support that the Pawpaws is here to serve the community, but I also, again, share some of the same concerns as Mayor Pro Tem. We don't want, if we don't want this to happen everywhere, we have to change the ordinance.
From council. Mayor Pro Tem.
I guess to the point, my point wasn't that it was private use, but it was a private decision to do it. It was not at a community event where they took input, things like this, which this board is all about that. It was a private decision. And the community does get a benefit from it, and I agree with that. And as I said, done things in my own life that contribute to that, but it was a private decision. And so to keep that from happening, I think we need to really move forward with the ordinance and making sure that these things are taken care of. I mean, I'll just stop at that. So I would be willing to amend this, make a motion to amend to include, I don't know if license is the right word, but I guess it is, a care agreement. Yeah.
MOU agreement?
An MOU.
I like that, a care agreement.
Sounds better than a license.
So
I like
is
that,
that a motion?
an agreement for care.
Support? You got
It is.
right now, or were you saying you were thinking?
Right now, I'm making that.
Support.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem, supported by Councilmember King. All right, discussion on the motion of a care agreement, AKA MOU. All these letters. Councilmember McLean.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll certainly support the amendment. I've had conversations with the city manager as well, but I've also had conversations with the residents who I know have already committed to doing this kind of work on these particular trees, and I have no doubt that they would be willing to do it in more areas as well. But for right now, on these particular ones, I don't think we'll have any problem putting that together. Thank you.
Comments on the amendment on the floor? Or Mayor Pro Tem?
So I'm guessing, in just procedurally, in terms of the language that we have, we just made that there needs to be an MOU. How does that get negotiated with residents?
Yeah, if this passes, then we'll get in touch with the residents who have planted this or the group that has committed to caring for the trees, and we'll iron that out with them, and then be all set.
Councilmember Simmons?
I just was gonna say, like, I think this totally makes sense, and I think it's nice, I think, to be able to name who's caring for the spaces. Like, I know one of the medians, like the Awkward Island in Ward 3, they did a whole planting, but that was, again, something that was predetermined and like worked through, and then but then the whole, community was able to participate in the preparing this space, planting this space, and ongoing. So I am I didn't understand originally, what the distinction, but I can see that being able to know who would be responsible as things go could be helpful. Even though I tend to want people to have to sign up for fewer things. But I think in the case of thinking about some of these spaces, I can understand how that could be helpful when possible.
Councilmember King?
I just quickly want to say, and then I think it lets the greater public know that this is for the community.
Other comments on the amendment on the floor? All right, please call the roll on the amendment, Clerk Boudreaux.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean.
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
The amendment passes.
you. All right, so we're on the amended resolution. Further discussion.
If I could just add one thing, we do currently have a process for planting trees on the median. It's just, I believe it was the specific type of tree, but I think with this care agreement MOU, we'll be able to iron that out.
Okay. Anything further? Councilmember Fellows.
Just one comment. Yes, it would be great to work on the ordinance to expand to native species and fruit-bearing trees like the pawpaws. And I just want to mention, I did see a pretty wonderful presentation on the ecology of this bioregion and what we know as Michigan. And, deforestation is a big part of our history, and that's caused many issues, including, erosion of our wetlands and flooding. And, if we're going to make a big change to combat these things, we're going to have to think outside the box. We're going to have to move away from kind of outdated policies that are so restrictive and be expansive and think about reforesting our urban environments. So just want to add that.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
I was going to say Clark Road.
Sorry. Yeah.
Housing's important too.
Any,
One quick thing.
No, you're
I just want to say, I don't want to combat these things. I just want procedures in place so it's fair for everyone.
Any other burning comments on the pawpaws? See, no, please call the roll.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson.
Yes.
The amended motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to extend.
So moved till 11.
Support.
It's been moved and supported to extend to 11. All in favor?
Aye.
Come on, y'all, lift your
No.
voices. All in favor?
It's tax day. I got to get out by 11.
I know I got stuff to do. Any opposed? Okay. All right. We're gonna extend
Serious.
to 11. No,
It's your birthday. I don't think.
I know, I was like, you can't use that again.
Okay. Councilmember King, you have our next resolution 069. Let's go.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti, whereas the City of Ypsilanti operates a building department for the issuance of building permits and inspections through the city. Whereas Carlisle Wardman has provided building official services to the city since May 1st, 2024, and the city has had no issues with the services provided. And whereas the city employs a qualified building official, now therefore be it resolved that the Ypsilanti City Council approve a building consulting services agreement with Carlisle Wardman, removing the building official services portion to be approved by the city attorney and signed by the city manager. So move.
By Councilmember King,
Support.
supported by Councilmember Tucson. Good evening.
Good evening, council. Sorry about that. I thought the motion was to approve the last thing. So that's why I got up a little early, Mayor.
Okay.
Like the motion says, Carlisle Wortman has been our building official for the last year. They've done a great job. However, because we have a fully qualified building official who has come in and really shown us how to be a very functioning building department, I think that Carlisle Wortman even agrees that they are. It takes more time for them to actually be building official and actually consolidate that in-house. They will be able to provide us building official services if Jerry is on vacation. But the city has not employed a building official in some time. Jerry and Carlisle Wortman have kind of split that role over the last 6 months. But really, there's no need to have two. And so the only change would be to remove that, which, like I said, Carlisle Wortman's in full support of. Yes.
Number 7.
Hello.
Hi.
So I have a couple of quick questions. So how long has there been an overlap in services?
So, I mean, Jerry could have taken on building official services from the very beginning because he was a fully qualified building official. However, we wanted to get him in and updated. And so there hasn't been a huge overlap in services. However, he has taken on all residential and some of the construction code pieces, especially when we need decisions a little bit more timely.
Carlisle Ortman's never been an in-house building official. They've been more kind of from abroad. And so it's basically been a as needed basis and as a and as needed. So not a huge overlap of services, more just getting him on board. And granted, everyone's taken a lot more of all of our time.
Mhm.
However, I do think this would be a much more succinct, better process to not have the dual layer.
Mhm. Well, because when did he start?
He started on May 28th.
Oh, so in this, we did this agreement last spring too, right?
We did it May 1st when it started. We had no idea that we were going to hire a qualified building official. And so the contract we had signed for 1 year was with that building official in the contract. And so the first time for us to really get out of that piece was now. But
Okay, so we couldn't renegotiate those terms.
we probably could have, but it was much better to get the building department running. And I think as a city manager has noted to me the other day, under Jerry's leadership, we've had almost zero complaints about customer service at at City Hall. And so we've really been able to up our game, I would
Mhm.
say. And so he has been focused more on making the department run functionally. But now that we got a pretty well-oiled machine, he doesn't have the capacity at this point, but really doesn't take that much more to be the building official.
Yeah, I mean, I think like those questions, in some ways stem, I mean, just in general, but also stem from, when looking at it, the auto renew is unless services are no longer needed and it's at a 5% increase. And so I think about, well, for actually almost the full contract, there's been an overlap in services. So we've been paying for services that have been shared with city staff and but still kind of paying that overage. So anyway, it just calls into question to me this increase and whether there's a way to actually renegotiate that, seeing that really we've been prepaying an increase for the whole term of the contract.
But when we bid out this contract, uh, the cost for the building official, as some of you might remember, I actually misrepresented it to council on accident because $1,000 a month was 10 times less than any other company had proposed to us. Carlisle Warman did that to try to get our business. And the building inspection piece has gone flawlessly, and that happens by somebody else. Um, I think that it's taken a lot more of their time than $1,000 a month, to be very honest. However, with that said, we we have seen that like prior to Carlisle Wortman being kind of an off-site building official, we had our building official in the office 1 day a week. And that was Kurt from Pittsfield Township. Now that we have Jerry in 5 days a week, we can just be way more efficient and actually go through things much quicker than emailing it out, waiting for it to get signed, having it emailed back. This is a much more instantaneous approvals as they can be given. And so when we bid this out, we had, like I said, the job description for the building department manager, it wasn't required to be a building official because we hadn't had one in 20 years. We didn't think we would get a qualified building official, and out of all the candidates we got, only one of them was a qualified building official, and just so happened to be the best candidate. So, like I said, we didn't know, and we needed somebody because Pittsfield Township was out. So I agree with you that's why the auto renewing as far as the building inspections, it kind of makes sense unless we come to a point where we're spending more than it would take to have a full-time employee come do it. At this point, it's not. Last year was a really busy year, but we would have needed to hire a contractor anyway due to the volume that we had. But this year it should actually be less.
Mayor Pro Tem?
So to be clear, this is just taking the building official out. So they're still doing construction plan review, they're doing building inspections, those things are still
Correct.
there. That's all.
And then this contract is just for this next year then.
It would be auto renewing. It would basically just be removing that. We can make it just for another year and bring it back in a year. That's fine. I don't think Carlisle would be be concerned about that. It just does make it a little easier so we don't have a tight deadline where we have to call for a special meeting if something gets missed.
And so then the way it is, then each year that it auto renews, it goes up 5%.
Yes, and I believe actually, when I talk to him, we might actually be able to, with our attorney, lower it down to 4 or 3%, but yes.
All right, thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none, Clerk Rougeau, please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows,
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. Councilmember King, you have 070.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the proposed conservation easement located at 2 through 4 West Forest Avenue, parcel number 11-11-04-360-001 be approved as presented. I so move.
Support.
By Councilmember King, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcox.
Good evening, council. So essential, sorry, I'm just getting situated. Essentially, we are bringing this resolution for the proposed conservation easement, just because it is a requirement within section 122-607 of the zoning ordinance to have these easements approved by council. It is also a requirement in that section that any new development that occurs along the Huron River, that you have at least a minimum of 50 feet from the river of a conservation easement essentially, but you can go up to 100 feet. And then, sorry. So ultimately, they brought that easement forward. It was also a requirement of the engineer through the detailed engineering review process to get this conservation easement approved. Ultimately, the project was approved back in, I believe it was 2021, and it was like end of 2021, but since then we've had staff turnover and the project didn't actually end up going through or finishing the detailed engineering review process. And so when they got their CFO, they ultimately just never completed the process. And so in order to get them through that process, we need we need the council to approve the conservation easement, but also the sidewalk easement that you'll see later. So do you guys have any questions about that?
If I could just add one thing, this is to close out a site plan that we are requiring for their permit renewal.
And does this delay them in that process or not, because this is something that we kind of didn't.
When the Chapter 7 was last approved, it provided the opportunity to negotiate with staff what they needed to do to be compliant. So they have their permit and they're in operation. They just needed to go through this process.
Other comments or questions? Seeing none, please call the roll. Clerk Rougeau.
Mayor Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Wow, that was loud.
Fellows, sorry, you have 071. I'm writing the wrong thing.
Resolution number 2025-071, resolved by the Council of the City of Ypsilanti that the proposed sidewalk easement located at 2 to 4 West Forest Avenue, parcel number 11-11-04-360-001 be approved as presented, and I so moved.
Support.
Fellows, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen. Again.
This would just be the sidewalk easement that.
Any questions? Comments?
I mean, ultimately, I can say that for the sidewalk easement, the planning commission required the sidewalk to be a minimum of 10 feet, which is why the engineer is requiring this easement. Ultimately, in the easement, it's going to mirror a lot of what we see in Chapter 94 of the General Code. The grantor, so essentially Quality Roots, they're gonna be responsible, and whoever owns it in the future, they're gonna be responsible for all the maintenance, they're gonna be responsible, um, just for any work in that general area overall. The city can also go in and like, still work on utilities and whatnot. It's essentially a normal sidewalk. It's just easement to preserve the 10-foot sidewalk that was required per the planning commission approval.
Interesting that you say that, because I thought when I read this that the city took responsibility for building it and maintaining the sidewalk. And I thought that was weird because that's not typically what happens with this. So,
Yeah, no, it states that the grantee um,
maintenance and
Oh.
repair of the sidewalk shall be subject to the city ordinance governing sidewalk. Okay, so there you go. It'll be at the grantee.
Other comments or questions? Are you still trying to ask a question?
Almost exactly.
Yeah, it's that whole paragraph. I guess I got this confused. If grantee does not perform such work.
I mean, ultimately, like, if the city were to, do any work on a sidewalk, and rip up the sidewalk, they would then replace it. We wouldn't go to the homeowner and be like, hey, you have to like pay whatever amount to repair the sidewalk that we just ripped up. That's not something that we would do.
Yes.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
Yes.
Councilmember McLean,
Yes.
Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Mayor Brown.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Question: were they required to plant trees in front of that building as part of the site plan?
Yes.
Pause.
Yes, they said six, half a dozen,
A dozen.
a dozen, 12.
Could they plant cannabis?
Uh-huh.
All right now, we're moving on. Thank you. Discussion regarding feedback on the council retreat questionnaire, and I will hand it over to Councilmember Simmons and King.
Yes, so I handed around a paper copy of like a document that would be made in, I mean, it could be, made into a form, but I figured this would be easier for us to see it. And so I think when we talked about this, we primarily wanted to bring it back to council just to see if there are any additions, if we kind of missed anything that we should be putting forward in the questionnaire. So just if anybody has any feedback or additions to what we have put forward, and then we would just I'm like trying to think when, but it will be put into a form. I'll say it without ownership. It will be put into a form, and then and then we can figure out like the date. So like you'll see like the date that I have on there. That's obviously his passed. But we would just determine, I think, a date. I would say like no more. I would say like 2 weeks or something, because obviously we know this process will take some time, and yeah, so just wanted to get any feedback on like the topic headings, or if there's any specific questions, or if there were different topic areas that you don't see that you wanted to, have up for consideration for the retreat, then yeah, we can add away.
I think folks are looking at this, but the floor is open for discussion. You have anything you want to add, Councilmember?
I was just gonna say add or take something away if you feel like this is not something that we need. So again, we apologize for getting into you all later than expected. but we definitely want to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I was gonna ask Councilmember King because I recall you had mentioned looking up at other municipalities' team building efforts. So I don't know if you have more information about what you saw.
Oh, I did reach out to other municipalities. I did not hear back from all of them as of yet. That is what the delay was in getting this document to you all. One, I reached out to Detroit and they said they do team building in other cities in Michigan. And again, I know some other places have said the same, but I have not spoke with them directly. And again, it's like what Washtenaw County did, they invited the public. So again, I am really interested in doing something that we can invite the public without too many barriers.
Thank you. I guess I have maybe two questions. Well, one comment and one question. My comment would be, I'm just gonna say that in terms of touring each facility, folks might vote for that when they get this, but I would love to spend our time together, like being people focused rather, because I mean, we've been invited to buildings before and we can do that, I think, at other times. And I would suggest that we don't spend any retreat time visiting the buildings because we can pick council time, to do it in groups or, schedule it. We've done that before. So I think that we need time together.
So would you want to remove that as an option?
I think since folks are going to rank them, I mean, there might be people who want to do that. So I don't want to remove it, but I'm just put it out there that I would love us to just spend time together. And then the question around traveling outside of the city for the retreat, I'm wondering, is that allowable? Like, I don't know, is that okay to do? It has to be an open meeting?
Again, I know we were told no. Say it again.
City council retreats are subject to
Yes.
the Open Meetings Act.
It has to be an open meeting.
So it has to be
but
open, it doesn't have to be here, it just has to be an open meeting of the city council.
that's what I mean. That's what we were gathering
Okay.
from the feedback.
Okay.
Which
Charter
is
would apply as to when and where those meetings can be located.
It may have to be within the city
Have to
limits.
be
I'm not
within the city
100%
limits.
sure, but we can look into it to be sure.
And so the reason why I'm asking is kind of like similar to when we have a joint meeting, like we've gone to the school board, they're not in the city, they're in the township. And we were able to do that, but that's why I'm asking, because I mean, outside the city could be right across Hewitt, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
is that allowable?
There's been HRC functions, I think a town hall, at the high school. There's been a task force meeting at the high school. I would defer to Randy about this, but we've done it in the past.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm just asking because outside the city, I mean, folks may think travel outside the city means we're trying to go to, Dexter, but that could just be FC Township. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Upper
So
Peninsula.
I guess it would be it would be
wants
good
to
to
go
have
Washington.
I guess it would be good to have clarification because what we've heard, and it could be that our charter limits us more than others charters. I hadn't seen anything in the charter. I mean, it's not like I know the charter by heart. I just look at it, probably more than I probably should, but I don't remember something in the charters talking about that specifically, but it would be helpful to know if that is something to do that we need to consider, if we need to put parameters. But the other thing I was thinking, yes, it could be going, to Traverse City, but it also could be, I know, but I'm just saying it could be like when we say travel outside, I was like, oh, it could be like going like further askew, but it also could be literally just around within Washtenaw County somewhere. So that there's other buildings or facilities or different things that, might provide the kind of atmosphere that we're looking for. And so, yes.
Councilman McLean.
Couple thoughts. One is my own experience may or may not be germane here, but I know when I was on the board of Washtenaw Community College, we went to Lansing, as I recall, for a retreat, and it had to be subject to open meetings. So had a few people from the public that went as well, but we went to Kellogg Center there, and absent something in our charter to the contrary, I think that may be possible. I agree with the mayor on the touring the city buildings, and would add one other topic area that I think is kind of high enough level, and that's communication. Communication, especially communication help to the community.
You're saying,
Add that to that topic area list.
uh-huh. So like, but you're saying, I just want to, so communication, you're saying from the council body to the general public?
I think the council particularly, but also
Like among us as
the
council
city.
members?
how
As
we
well
might
as,
communicate, for example, important elements of what's going on in the city as a group to this, to the community.
I guess one thing just to see, this could just be a general consensus. If other people feel, just because it's been mentioned now twice, if we feel that the tour doesn't feel like something we necessarily would want to fit within this, like, we can remove it. So I guess, can we just see like a general sense of how many people would be into us removing it?
Yeah, I'd be, yeah.
Because, yeah, we don't need more check marks. So,
It's like everybody on this side.
yeah. So I'm going to just go ahead and remove it. Okay. Yeah. No.
I mean, I think touring them and everybody seeing the facilities is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have it, please do.
Yeah.
City manager?
I just have a quick question. Tracy, Randy, and I will be there, but do you want more staff members there? How did you want to do that? It is a council retreat, so, but if you would like staff interaction, we'll be there.
I'll add that as a thing here. Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think we considered staff necessarily.
Although, of course, we know y'all have to be there. We appreciate you very much.
No, thank y'all.
But yeah, I'll add that, like a question of like, other staff that we might want. Okay.
Any other feedback or comments about this? I appreciate you all putting this together and all the topic areas and all of that. Oh, I guess my question would be under timing. It looks like there's 6 options, but I'm hopeful that like they connect, like we pick a month and then if it's half a day or half.
Yeah, it'll be
Okay.
it'll be like check all that apply. I just like literally was like, oh, this way we don't have as many.
Okay, gotcha.
But and as you see, it's like just June, July, August. I didn't get too specific because I also was thinking, do I put weekend, whatever. But I figured we'll figure out the date, I think, as a group. But I just figure, yeah, I wanted to put something to get so we can start to hone in. But yeah, I was thinking that it would be like a check all that apply.
Awesome. Mayor Pro Tem?
I guess I'm looking at this and thinking about the time and the diversity of the topics here. And I know that we'll pare this down and everything, but I just feel like an outside facilitator would really be necessary, and that would free up people to be able to engage in the discussion on a different level than if they were trying to facilitate as well.
Agreed.
One other thing that just popped into my head, since it is open meetings that will need to be recorded and then maintained for a year following the approval of the minutes. So keep it, yeah, just we'll need to.
Electricity?
Yes.
Internet?
Well, we don't necessarily have to have the internet.
Camera. Okay.
We would.
So
We
don't
just
have to
really
live
need a
stream.
digital
Oh,
record.
we need to record it.
Yeah.
Got it. So we don't.
Or
need
do
it.
we need to post the recording?
Yeah.
You just have to have it.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Okay. Look, internet. You don't know internet. Okay. For the Councilmember Susan?
Yeah, and with the to add on to Mayor Pro Tem's point about facilitation, I also agree that we should go with and hire a facilitator. But when I think about who to hire as a facilitator, I go back to Dr. Milner, and I enjoyed how he facilitated our it's escaping me.
Goal setting.
The goal setting. Thank you. So if we do go in the direction of hiring a facilitator, I would be in full support of getting Dr. Milner.
Okay. Okay. City, what? Okay.
I was just going to say in that section, maybe we can put an empty line so
Yeah,
people
that's what-
can make suggestions.
Yeah, it does have a thing for folks to suggest,
number
to make
4.
recommendations, as well as to think about community volunteers that also have a skill set that might be able to also facilitate. Because as far as I understand too, we don't necessarily have but we'll have to talk about like a budget for this and things like that. And so I would consider that. And I mean, whatever. I have other thoughts, but I'll leave it. Go ahead.
Clerk Boudreaux?
So first to the funding, I do think that it kind of could fall under your training budget if that's where you wanted to take it without allotting any additional funds. And then I do have a facilitator that I think I mentioned to council previously, and I will share his information with you. He facilitates the clerk training that we go to for a full week for 3 years. And he's phenomenal. I know, council in particular, you've talked about team building, and that's one of the things that I found most beneficial from him is that you just walk out of there like, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, we're a team, and we can do anything together. So I thought it was wonderful. I will share the information that he's given me, and then you could probably go and look and see if I don't know if he's got any trainings out there that you could look at. But
Thank you.
he's
That would be
phenomenal.
helpful.
Yeah, I think recommendations are great for us to have choice options.
Great, thank you.
Anything else? Or are we feeling good about, you all feel like you have more direction on what?
Wait, I do.
Any?
Famous?
I just wanted to say thank you for putting this together.
If I may, for the last item on the agenda, the FOIA appeal, Mr. Nouri was not able to make it today, so I would respectfully suggest that you postpone this until the next meeting, so he could be here.
I so move.
Can I ask for legal advice? How does this work?
So, in theory, the appeal is determined on the written submissions. So I can be asked about the specifics of the request and the basis for the response to that request. And the responding department head that produced the documents could be asked questions about that. But I don't get a sense from the city's policy practices regarding FOIA appeals that the appellant may actually make a presentation to council. So I'm not certain, well, I can't say as I sit here, having gone through all of that, and we provided council with a copy of all of the practices and procedures that had previously been adopted, that the appellant is entitled to communicate directly with council on the matter. The council can just decide it based on memorandum of the clerk and my comments and that of Mr. Myers, who was the producing department head.
What about our timeline too? Because isn't there like a timeline requirement?
It's considered submitted at the, it's
Day.
submitted, so it is submitted to council. Council has 10 days and at least according to the rules to make a decision on that. And
Yeah.
and so I would suggest that the failure to consider it today would be a denial, or could be construed as a denial because it would be an untimely response.
Unless we give an extension for that, which there's a provision for that.
I agree.
Councilmember McLean had his hand up, and then I'll go to Councilmember King. No? Oh, Councilmember King.
I was just gonna ask Ms. Boudreaux, did this individual say they were going to come and then they contacted you and said they weren't gonna make it tonight?
No, so in the initial contact, and to be fair, I didn't contact him that long ago, but in the initial contact, he said he wouldn't be able to come today. And he did just question whether council would address it with him here or not.
Okay.
So we could, I mean, I was just gonna say, with all the discussion, it makes me feel like we should probably put the motion out if we want to keep discussing it. But, my Robert's rules is,
You should put it on the table if we want to discuss it. I mean, I think so. Parliamentarian. Should we put it on the?
It's on the table. It's on the agenda.
No, but I haven't read the thing, so.
just started talking
Oh.
about it.
That's what I'm
I
saying, is
interrupted.
like,
Yeah.
I'm saying like, should I read it in if we want to keep talking about it
It's technically not on the table right
or not? It was, I know you asked the question, so.
I am interested in leaving by 11, so
now. Well, let me not say that.
that's the only thing I.
So then I don't know.
Please read it in.
Put it on the table, please.
Okay.
Councilmember Simmons.
After hearing the presentations and considering the FOIA requests and the denial notices and considering the FOIA Act and the facts and circumstances of the matter, it is hereby resolved that the FOIA appeal of Alex Nuri is denied, and I so move.
Support.
By Councilmember Simmons, supported by Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxon. Now it's on the table. We can discuss what we're gonna do.
Great. I have a question.
Yes. Councilmember Simmons.
So I have two questions, I think. Well, whatever. One is whether so there was this question about numbers changing, and I'm wondering, one, did they change, and how would that impact the addresses on the street? If that change did so happen.
Good evening, council, again. So the addresses in this property did change. When there was a lot of turmoil on the third floor, between the building and planning departments, the addresses needed to be created on this property. They were addressed. They were addressed incorrectly. Half of the buildings received odd number addresses. Half the buildings received even number addresses, which kind of creates a whole big problem, especially there because half of the property is in Superior Township, half of the, no, sorry, that road, half is in Superior, half is in the city of Ypsilanti. And so when dispatching, the addresses have to be on the same, like odd have to be on one side and even have to be on the other. So when this problem was brought to us by 911 saying this can't happen, we had to readdress everything. And so I think the concern with the FOIA person was the person who requested the FOIA is that, the paperwork was not submitted as properly back when the addresses were created in 2023. And so we only had the document that was created in 2024 correcting the errors. No other person, the person that I've talked to at great length is having trouble getting cable. No one else in this building is having the same problem getting cable except for this individual.
Oh, in terms of, because of the address change. I see. Can we just like give them a like good, hey, cable person?
Well, that's,
Can we give them a letter to take to cable or something? I guess
We
is
have
what I'm
provided
asking.
the letter that we submitted to the cable company, to the 911, to the post office. We've given him the letter that we submitted. We only submit one letter. He has that letter. He just thinks that there's more information that we have and we don't.
Okay. But that's not going to necessarily answer the question of the issue. I guess. And then the other thing is this was like a clarification in the things that we were given, which was one of the reasons for denial originally was saying that the city does not have communications that Lincoln Capital would have, things are outside of the city, but I thought that the question was around communications from Lincoln Capital to the city about changing. But it sounds like from what you're saying was that the change didn't come from them. Like the change came because of being contacted by dispatch and saying, hey, there's a numbering issue.
Correct.
So, and so that communication wouldn't even necessarily fall within this, but just to know that it precipitated from emergency response needs.
Yeah, every address that was given, not every, a number of addresses that were given in 2023 were done incorrectly. We fixed them at this point.
Okay. Great, thank you. Those are my questions. Well,
May I would just note that from our perspective, when we receive a FOIA request, Deputy FOIA Administrator polls all departments to determine whether there are potentially responsive documents. Mr. Myers identified only those documents that were in fact produced. We certified to the requester that no other records existed because there was no other records identified in that search. Essentially, the appeal is there must be more. The city does not have an obligation to generate documents out of thin air to fulfill a request. It only produces documents that exist in response to a request. And we have done that, at least according to the responses that we received, and Mr. Myers's comments are clear on what we had, and we provided what we had.
So in the original request, please include the document stating why the numbers changed and by which entity or group, and then list things, but it's dispatch, and there is no letter to that effect? Or he's got that letter? That is what was in the letter?
So the only person who can actually create the addresses is the city. And so dispatch came to us and said, I think it was odd numbers on an even side of the road. And so that wasn't, I don't know if that email was pulled, but still, I explained it to him very, very thoroughly. Like, this is what happened, because he came into our office about 7 times before submitting the FOIA. And I explained to him the situation. I gave him the letter that we submitted. He then FOIA'd for the letter. I gave him the letter again. And so he had wanted the communication that we had when really we had been told this was an issue. We fixed the issue.
So I guess to this point, I mean, if dispatch initiated this whole thing, that seems like what he's getting at is like, does he have that email from dispatch to you saying this needs to be fixed?
I don't know. I can double check. It was a bit ago, but I think the other issue is dispatch didn't even email me, so it was a kind of an email from an email from an email. But I mean, that email is not privileged by any means.
Right.
And I did not get the email from dispatch, so I think that is why maybe I did not turn that email over. But still, regardless, it's not going to provide any of the information that he is looking for.
And it's not going to solve the problem that
No.
he's having.
No.
And
But I can double check on that. I don't know.
okay. So if it is available,
Yeah, no,
provided, that'd be great.
If he did not, if it doesn't already have it, he can get that. That's not a problem. But it's still, there isn't any additional info that.
Okay.
Again, this is effectively 2 requests, one from March 27th, and then a redundant or verbatim identical request that was submitted again on April 4th and
Sure.
denied because of the earlier response.
Are there comments or questions? Councilmember Simmons, when you read this into the record, did you choose one?
Yes, you did.
Okay, that's what I thought I heard. I couldn't.
I said
Denied.
I know the denied part, but I couldn't remember if I heard the first. Okay. All right. There's no further. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Tucson,
Yes.
Councilmember Simmons,
yes.
Councilmember McLean, Councilmember King,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilcoxen,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Fellows.
Yes.
Motion to deny passes.
Thank you. All right, we're at liaison reports, Police Advisory Commission.
Yes, the next time YPAC will be meeting will be next Thursday, the 24th of April at 7 p.m. right here in council chambers. That's all.
HRC,
We are meeting this Thursday at 6 p.m.
Parks and Arts,
Next meeting is Monday, 21st April.
Sustainability.
So the sustainability meeting was yesterday, but did not have quorum. But just to say that They do have, they will be publishing a flyer outlining a lot of Earth Day events going on for April 26th and 27th. They have a full day of things happening, not only in the city, but in some of our neighboring areas, including a planting project with Willow Run Acres and Superior Township, some things at the different schools, and the district library will have Earth Day events at each of the branches, and that includes the one downtown too. Yeah, each. Uh, but anyway, so that will be coming out toot sweet soon.
HDC?
Met on Tuesday, April the 8th, considered the following: 212 South Huron for a partial roof, 417 Maple for windows, 19 North Hamilton for a sign, 47 North Huron for windows, and the Freight House for signage, just a refacing of an existing sign.
Planning Commission?
They meet tomorrow. The agenda is online.
ZBA?
Don't know that there's anything scheduled for that.
SEMCOG?
No update at this time.
Watts?
Coming up.
Urban County, nothing to report. DDA, the meeting's Thursday. Rutherford Pool?
I missed the meeting. I need to check in with Jessica.
All right, council proposed business. I'll start down here. Councilmember Tucson.
Yeah, I just want to make everybody aware that April 19th, that's this Saturday at 10 a.m. at Perry School, will be the Easter egg hunt extravaganza. So bring the kids out, bring yourselves out, enjoy the community. Yeah, let's find some eggs. Also, I'd like to give everybody an update about Walk the Ward that I did last Tuesday. It was very cold. So what I'm going to be doing going forward, I'm going to, rearrange that to do Ainsworth yet again. But the response by the residents via phone call has been great. So directed them to report some of the lighting issues to the See Click Fix on the city's website. And I'm hoping that when we go back out there again, that there's more participation from the residents. I would also like to give my deepest condolences to the Leith family for the recent loss of the brother Deshaun Leith, who has done amazing work in not only just our city, but the whole Washtenaw County. That loss is deep for me because I knew him personally as well as through his work. So, yeah, deepest condolences to the Leith family. That's all.
Councilmember Fellows.
I got to go to the Ipsy Library downtown district location reopening yesterday. It was great. The energy was over the top. So I would recommend everybody go check it out. It's been 2 years in the making and it's beautiful. And I also just want to echo Councilmember Tucson's comments about Deshaun Leith and just extend my condolences to my colleagues who knew him as well as other people in the community. It is a tragic loss, and I do think that community is reeling from it. I do want to bring up some dates over the next couple council meetings. May 20th, we'll have a presentation by Ipsy Big, which is the 2024 ballot initiative group, to talk about the one of the petitions that didn't get submitted. And then on June 17th, we have our first CBO work session. Hoping to have the community group ready, involved with that one. And the meeting right after that, July 1st, is our second commission work session. So we kind of have a couple work sessions right in a row. And I think I will leave it at, no, I want to say one more thing, which is just like, I have really appreciated working with my colleagues lately and these very terrifying times. And I'm glad to be doing like a collaborative team building retreat soon, but I actually feel more camaraderie as we've been working together because I think it's just nice to be able to progress things in the city, even as, things in national politics is really unstable. So just extending appreciations to you all.
Just mentioned, I enjoyed going to the pancake breakfast at the Methodist Church on Washington a couple of Saturdays ago. And I'm going home and trying to get over this cold. Sorry.
Thank you. Mayor Forte.
I had the pleasure of attending the Straight Ahead concert at the Freight House on Sunday afternoon as part of the UMS programming. So just remind people that there is more programming in the month of April there. One of the things that happened was you can go online and buy tickets in advance, but the website is not cooperative. And so it will say tickets are not available at this time. Show up anyway. There are a lot of tickets that are reserved for availability at the door. That's the whole point of this. It's a sliding scale. You can pay, that was up to $20 a ticket, but you could pay as little as $5 a ticket for those things. So, or whatever you can afford. So, if you get frustrated with the website, just show up. That's all.
Councilmember Simmons.
Yes, couple quick things. I already talked about the June 29th event. I did receive a question from a community member about the end of curbside pickup at the dispensaries, and they were wondering when and why. And I don't know, does anybody else remember this exactly?
Are you talking about the ones in the downtown?
Is it only for ones downtown? I think people have been saying that's been all of them.
I know the ones downtown, there is no curbside pickup. Stevens was just picking it up, but we don't actually have curbsides.
Dispensary. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Dispensaries.
Not garbage.
Not garbage. Curbside.
It's
Curbside service. I'm sorry.
Pick up like pulling up
I'm
and getting your
sorry. Not the waste. Because I was like, Stevens.
That's-
Yes,
that's
not
aga-
the waste. It
That's
was,
against our ordinance. We only allowed it shortly during COVID.
so it was just a short-term extension that then timed out.
Right.
Basically. And so if there was a desire to change, we would just have to go through and change that.
It would be the zoning code.
Okay, thank you. I will pass that along. And then the other thing, this is just more of an announcement. This is actually something that I'll be, I know that a couple of meetings ago, we have put the our ordinance around immigration and everything on the agenda. But then obviously since then, we've seen some true incursions, I would say, into our constitution and true horrors happening in our community. And so in conversation, talking with some folks, I would like to have us look at this and make sure that it's strong enough. So I'll be probably trying to set up some time with you, Randy, share it with you and try to see what we might do to make sure that it's strong, while also not being obstructive, in order to best protect our community members, which is what our charge is. And, our oath is to, actual laws and constitution. So.
Thank you. Councilmember King.
So first, I want to just bring up, I recently went to Joe's Market because I heard from constituents that the floor was not level. So when I went in, I experienced the same thing, almost falling on my face. And I spoke with the owners and they stated that they are working on that. And I will follow up, and I would also ask the building department to follow up as well. Joe's Market on what street? Is it Hamilton? No, it's not Hamilton. I'm sorry, I don't have the street.
Yeah.
Here, yeah, here.
That's where it is. So I would ask them to also follow up. I would like to say rest in peace to Deshaun Leaf. I have enjoyed seeing the different tributes to him on social media and the ones that have happened in person, even though I have not been able to attend. I also want to make the announcement that I announced that I want to do a town hall on April the 24th. The building that I wanted to use is not available, so I may have to change that. And the last thing is some of my neighbors were in communication with me about restarting a community garden that was once in Ainsworth Circle. I did speak to the city manager regarding this already, and I just wanted to let the public know that I did send an email communicating, connecting both the city manager and the neighbors that want to take this project on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, it's my turn. Yeah, I just want to start by excitement around the library reopening. It's beautiful. I remember walking through there when they were kind of half done, and now it's open, and that community space is available to folks again, and that's very important. Um, Reiterating that it's Black Maternal Mental Health Week, and so there are events happening, not only across the county and the city, but across the state. I want to say happy 11th work anniversary to our city manager. 11 years of service to the city. That's amazing. So thank you. Councilman Tucson talked about the Easter egg hunt on the 19th. So hopefully folks and their families can come out to that. Sammy Slam ends this Friday. So if you haven't been eating Sammys, you got a few more days left to go try some Sammys. And then, I will end also sharing my condolences to a community champion and advocate and my friend, to the family of Deshaun Leith. I have written a proclamation and special tribute for him and have shared that with his family, and they asked that I present that at his homegoing on Thursday, so I'll be doing that. I am not presenting it at the table at this time because they requested to wait until the time they felt more able to be present to participate in that process. So I will add that to a later agenda so they can be here. But I do feel it's important in this moment to I just want to read 2 lines of the proclamation that I wrote because I think it's just really important to share. As people are human and nuanced and complicated. And it's really important. I've shared in other spaces around offering grace and understanding because we don't know at any point what anyone is going through, and none of us are perfect. And so a few of the clauses in the proclamation that I wrote state that Deshaun's impact is etched into the hearts of all who had the privilege of knowing him, his passion and generosity igniting hope and change wherever he went, and his earthly presence will be deeply missed. The legacy of Deshaun Leith will live on through the lives he touched, the communities he empowered, and the futures that he helped to shape. And so, yeah, huge loss for our community, huge loss for the youth in our community. I've had the opportunity to attend several of the memorial events, including hosting something for folks who worked alongside him, just to share in their grief and healing together in collaboration. And so I hope that we all, pick up the torch and continue to be champions for the community and for young people specifically, because that is what he wanted. And he was impassioned and ever moving around this community to lift that as a priority in Washington County and across, Southeast Michigan, to be honest. And so he'll be deeply missed. City manager.
The MML has completed their investigation of the 8 applicants for police chief. 3 applicants passed those interviews. The first charrette for Water Street will be held tomorrow beginning at 10:30. This will be at Spark East. Many council members have brought this up, but I went to the downtown library yesterday. The energy there was fantastic. It's great to have that back. It's you really understand what an asset it is when it isn't open for 2 years. We did, staff spoke with Carlisle Wortman, who basically set out the process for these 3 charrettes that will be followed by the 6 focus groups. Staff and I will be meeting with Councilmember Fellows to kind of discuss our thoughts on the resolution that she prepared, and more will be coming. That's all I got.
I have a quick question. Is there a Zoom option for the history of Water Street tomorrow?
I don't believe so, but there might be. I will find out.
Okay.
I don't have that in my head, but I will make sure to email it out early tomorrow.
If there's a possibility of that.
Indoor recording?
Or record, right.
I know I'm pretty sure there will be a virtual meeting component at some point. But I'll double check and make sure there is, it's at Spark East. I don't know what the hookup is there, but we might be able to do something.
City Clerk, do you have anything?
Just very quickly, Hart, our election equipment provider, came in and did a project maintenance upgrade for the year. So all of the equipment is a little more brand spanking new. And just to think about that, in 2 years, the state is going to redo the contract for election equipment, and it may mean buying new equipment if they change providers. I agree. And that would be my hope, but we just always have to put it out there.
Thank you. All right, I don't have any other remarks. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Hello. Don't want to talk to you.
Oh,
Okay. Bonds, team,